listening to the Intellivisionaries.
Hello again, and welcome to the Intellivisionaries podcast. This is episode 4, where we are going to talk all about Christmas Carol and the Ghost of Christmas Presents. Thanks for tuning in. My co-hosts, Rick Reynolds and William Olds, are also here, and we're going to talk some feedback off the bat here. Guys, you with me?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
All right. Just for starters, I wanted to mention our friend of the show, Ferg, who does the Atari 2600 Game by Game podcast, which you should all be listening to if you aren't. Even if you are an Intellivisionary, you should listen to his show. Very enjoyable, very thorough, lots of details that I've never heard before about these games. And I'm a 2600 fan as well, and as are my co-hosts. So we got a really nice email from Ferg. I'm not going to read the email to you. That's between Ferg and us. But he is very complimentary. You know, just kind of alluded to the fact that he doesn't really like the Intellivision, but when he listens to our show, he does. So... And he said some nice things about us on his Space Invaders episode of 2600 Game by Game also. So thank you, Ferg. Very much appreciated. And right now, as I speak, Ferg was about to release his Night Driver and golf episode, but he's ill. So get well soon. Well, by the time you hear this, you will be well and have done 7 other episodes because it takes us way too long to get an episode out, right?
We do what we can. The disadvantages of being monthly.
Yeah.
So I was going to mention that just in other feedback areas over on Atari Age, the user Revolutionika.
I just call him Rev.
Yeah, everybody calls him Rev. So he was adding a bit to our episode 3 thread that we posted over there, which I unfortunately titled episode 4. And it stayed that way for some time until I finally got a
wishful thinking.
Yeah, I finally got a forum moderator to fix it for us, but. He made some comments about the segment we did. Well, not segment. The little bit of where we just kind of mentioned that the Tron multicart that's coming out, and we just kind of questioned the legality of that. Just kind of threw that in there, and it was just kind of interesting because it's such a weird topic for Intellivision. I think this idea of this quasi legal status of certain pieces of the hobby, and so we kind of mentioned that, and as the thread kind of went forward a little bit further, there were people, I don't know if it was 1 or 2 people, but basically said, hey, this might be a really cool segment for the show, and I really think we should do that. I think we should just, at some point, I don't know if it's a segment, I doubt it's a whole episode, but talk a little bit about intellectual property and copyright and how that interfaces with the Intellivision hobby, because I think the Intellivision hobby is a little bit unique in retro gaming because of what Keith Robinson's doing. There's actually a real functioning company out there trying to put out product that's associated with the Intellivision brand name, and so there's a concern there, right? I mean, if we all like Keith, we want Keith to succeed, and so there's some nuance there that maybe isn't true for people who are just doing hacks of Atari ROMs and selling them over on Atari Age or something like that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think that there's. I personally, I don't think I'm ready to talk about that in any depth. I want to dig a bit more and try to find out what's enforceable in these situations. Like, the fear is big bad company comes and stomps on you, and even if you win the lawsuit, you lose, right? I mean, that's they can bankrupt you just in the legal fees. So you tend to be real cautious about it. But and that's of course the safe route. But it'd be fun to hash it out a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, I posted in that thread, and with kind of a long post about that too. And I think people, whenever we talk about this, or because we've mentioned it in a couple of episodes now, just touched on it for various reasons. People think that we're attacking the homebrew community and that we shouldn't say that, and we're against homebrew, and that's not at all the case. I think it's a very unique situation with the Intellivision because, Keith Robinson, not only did he take up the helm and carry on with the Intellivision name, which of course he bought. It wasn't something he just said, hey, I want to do this. It's not going to cost me anything.
Right.
And, he has to get the rights to the games, the name, the look, everything, the commercials, all that stuff costs money, and it costs money to develop the Gen 2 stuff. And we're not sure what it is yet, but the standalone direct-to-TV kind of Intellivision system they're working on with AT Games that we talked about in one of the last episodes. So I'm on both sides of it. I know Keith. I wouldn't say he's like a good friend, but I've had talks with him at Classic Gaming Expo, and I had a meeting with him when I started the idea for the Intellivisionaries podcast. And some of the stuff I mentioned in that thread, if you haven't read it, I'll just touch on a little bit more. When I spoke to him about doing the podcast, just as a courtesy, I said, do you mind if we use this image? Do you mind if I use songs from your CD, Intellivision and Hi-Fi? Do you mind if I use commercial clips? And he gave me verbal permission, and that's fine. Now, the thing with licenses is a lot of those titles on the Intellivision, those licenses expired, 30 years ago. There's no way that Disney is going to say, hey, yeah, sure, we'll renew that Tron license for you so you can sell 300 games to a small community of collectors. Sure, it's only going to cost you, I don't know, $2-3 million? How's that sound? It's just not going to happen. So that's how those games are made. They have to be made by homebrew people. Now, at the same time, that hurts Keith, because he'd love to put out a Tron game, but he can't because it's too expensive. It's touchy subject. And again, homebrew people are going to say, the Atari age people are going to say, oh, you guys, you shouldn't talk about this. You don't like Intellivision homebrew. Nobody says that about Atari community when they put out cartridges, but it's a different situation. So we're pro homebrew and we're pro Keith Robinson Intellivision Productions. So it's a little bit of a conflict there.
Yeah, I think it'd be fun to do a segment on it. I'm thinking of Scott Shriver from Retro Gaming Roundup. Gosh, I couldn't pull out which episode it was. It's been got to be more than a year ago, maybe more than a couple years ago. He did a little thing about intellectual property and copyright in games, and kind of he'd broken the basic concerns down into a number of categories that he had little goofy names for. But it was really interesting to listen to his kind of take on it. And he talked about the issues of paying for the same property over and over again. Like, how many times do I pay for Pac-Man? How many times do I how many times do I pay for something Tron related? Now, again, if each one's a unique work, that makes sense. But at some point, like buying the latest version of Pac-Man is not really buying anything all that new, and I'm just pumping more money into the same product. And anyway, it's worth a listen if you can find it. I don't know which episode it was in, but it's buried back in their history somewhere.
Yeah, I don't recall the episode number either, but I did hear that one.
I guess there's some nuance to the subject. I guess I said I guess a lot there. There's some nuance to the subject beyond just saying, hey, don't do it, or hey, anything goes. So
I guess indeed.
Easy
I've
for you
seen
to say.
projects that come and go. I've seen projects where people start on them, and then a company will say, sorry, you can't work on this. And then other projects, they come out, they get released, and nothing's really said.
So we're not going to talk any more about that now, but we're going to have an episode.
Segment coming that might be more interesting than that.
Yeah. And you know what?
A little bit more.
That said, I want to welcome any and all feedback on this subject. And we may have just sabotaged all possibility of interviews with some people, but just by what we just talked about. But I want to hear what you guys think. We want to hear what you guys think. You can hit us up in the forums, or Tarage is fine, or email us, the usual. Facebook. Is it cool? Is it good? I mean, I freely admit I have bought pretty much every homebrew game that's been made for the system, and full well knowing that they're not quote unquote legal as far as that goes, but the likelihood of any of that ever being enforced is slim and none. It's about as likely as us doing a podcast on the NES.
There you go.
Not against the NES per se, but just saying.
Just no depth there.
We just lost more listeners. Awesome.
Okay, back up. What I meant was I have no depth in that subject. That's what I meant. I
Okay.
can't talk NES with any depth.
No. Or in television.
Now, hold on. So another item for in the feedback section here, over on Atari Age, a user S1500 had started. Well, there's a thread that's been on Atari Age since back in November of 2009 that is still getting replies. I had noted down 1,289 replies as of December 1st. The thread titled Two Worthy Video Game Podcasts. So apparently S1500, one of the things he's done a couple of times in this thread that's gone multi-years is he puts up nominations for what he calls Podcast of the Year awards. And I gather it's just, his opinions, hey guys, what do you guys think? And then some people in the Atari Age forum community, I guess, vote in some way. But anyway, he nominated our show for Game of the Year, which is kind of cool. I'm surprised. Anyway, we didn't win. That's not as surprising. Ferg's show, 2600 Game by Game, won that award, and now, of course, that means that we will never win that award because he defines that as you have to be nominated in the year you began. So since we were a 2013 podcast and we lost in 2013, we're never going to be Podcast of the Year again, according to S1500.
Well, yeah, thanks for the nomination on that. I'm not entirely sure how one gets nominated, whether that's all S1500 doing that or other people. But yeah, that was really cool, and I think it's
nice to be seen.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's great that Ferg won too. And he had a head start on us, so what are you going to do? But we started in September, so just kidding, Ferg. I think he was the rightful winner on that one, and he got his potty award, which sounds funnier when you say it, as he mentioned.
Something tells me I could do without a potty award, maybe. I don't know.
Oh, everyone could use one.
No room left on your award shelves, Rick?
They're just packed with other potty awards.
Yeah, and if you want to, you can listen to that. He did a podcast, S1500, about that awards, or he kind of does it live with the crowd in the background and stuff, which is kind of cool. Yeah, that's Classic Console Gamer News. That's ccg.podomatic.com, and you can check that out there, or just go to Atari Age and search for the Two Worthy Video Game Podcast thread. And speaking of S1500, which I don't know what his real name is, but that's fine. He was a guest on episode 28 of Now You're Playing with Podcast, along with Ferg and RJ, who is the guy in Atari Age who started that Two Worthy Video Game Podcast thread, I believe. And they were saying some nice things about us on the show there. So that was really cool. Thanks, guys. And I enjoyed that episode. It's a nice mix. I know you have quite a few episodes. You guys have been doing that for a while, but it seems like there's kind of a lot of different people that come on the show. I'm not really an expert on all of the regulars, but I did enjoy that episode, and I have listened to other episodes. So that's Now You're Playing with Podcast. Find it on iTunes and all the usual places.
So our friends over at Retro Gaming Roundup released episode 67 last month, and their top 10 for that month was the top 10 launch titles. And anyone unfamiliar with their show, each of the hosts will pick 4 games, and then they get down to 10 games and take 2 right out of the running. And Scott put Armor Battle for the Intellivision into his list, but unfortunately it was overruled by SoCal and UK. Mm-hmm. It was actually outed in favor of Night Trap.
Oh,
ouch.
Really?
Which I have yet to actually play.
I've only
seen to try.
I've only seen YouTubes of it or something like that. Oh my!
Maybe UK and SoCal are fans of Dana Plato, the actress from that aforementioned game. I've never played it. Yeah, I mean I haven't heard the episode yet, but wow. Of the launch titles, I don't know. Would you say Armor Battle was? It's a great little game. I don't know that it was the strongest of the original launch titles, but I suppose it would have been. I didn't hear what Scott said about it yet, but yeah, that's interesting.
I got to listen to it. I mean, he talked about how Armor Battle took kind of the classic Intellivision twist on games, making them more simulation oriented, a lot more gameplay elements hiding behind things. You're moving slower through the woods than you are on the road, and that just didn't compare to combat. Combat was just so much simpler. So he was just kind of making that case for it, and I think Night Trap edged it out from SoCal and UK's perspective, it being like the first of these real full motion video games coming out, the kind of a landmark thing. Whatever, I've never played it, so.
I'll be checking that out this week. Anyway, thanks for trying, Scott.
Yeah,
thanks
we appreciate
it. Taking one for the team here.
So I wanted to mention another podcast. We've got a lot of podcast friends here, I think. But there's a podcast called the Retro League that I've been listening to since, I don't know, just a few episodes now. But the format, basically, they talk news, they talk retro this, and it's very gaming oriented. But each of the hosts picks a pick of the week kind of a thing, and they just kind of talk about maybe a game you haven't heard of or a game worth a relook or something like that. And the host, the one host is named Hugh. I actually don't know the host very well. I'm still new to the podcast, but Hugh picked Thunder Castle for Intellivision and talked about the gameplay, went through it in some detail. Probably spent 10 minutes on it. So it was really fun to listen to him talk about it. That's episode 211 of the Retro League. If you want to check that out, I do like both these guys. I think Hugh. I don't want to speak for him because I don't really know him all, but I think Hugh has a soft spot in his heart for Intellivision. I've heard him on a couple of occasions when they're talking about some gameplay element of some game. He's thrown in more than once. Well, that's similar to what they did on Intellivision for this title, or something like that. And so it seems like they at least know a little more about the Intellivision than maybe others over at that podcast. Worth listening to.
Yeah, I've listened to quite a few of their episodes, and they do know about a lot of games, many of which I have never heard of. But yeah, it's definitely worth a listen.
All right, so you want to talk some Intellivision news? What news there might be?
Yes, let's discuss the news of Intellivision.
the news for the 1979 platform.
Yes, breaking news.
Exactly.
So on the subject of this month's episode, James Pujals has a contest over on his site, carolversusghosts.com. And it's a contest for high scores on Christmas Carol versus the Ghost of Christmas Presents. And he has achievements for it for different things you're doing in the game, such as getting past certain levels. And at the end of the contest, which is, as of recording, 20 days, I think it's going to December 31st. It's the last day of the contest. And he has all sorts of prizes, like there's mugs with cocoa and all sorts of patches. And the patches run from listing you as a master elf, ranger elf, and even novice.
And of course, the grand prize.
Oh, yes, the grand prize of a one-of-a-kind version of the game.
Yeah, so this is kind of a repeat of what he did last year. To kind of, of course, last year the game was brand new, and they did a big contest, and one of the top prizes, he basically makes a custom ROM, and I think you get it in a cartridge as well, of suggestions you give him. Like they show this goofy mock-up of what it might be like, and it looks like I mean, we're going to talk about all these elements later on when we review the game, but the snowman has been replaced by some kind of maybe a pink bunny thing or something. It's a pink version of the snowman, and he just basically said, I can change the patterns, I can change the coloring, I can change, and kind of skin the game, if you will, to something that you had in mind to make a new level. And I know that the grand prize winner last year got a cool one-of-a-kind cart. So anyway, the point is they're doing it again this year. You got to the end of the month, get out there and play the game. And as again, we're going to mention all this, but there is a ROM image available for free, so you can play it in emulation. And the rules of the game do not disallow emulators. They're basically just saying, hey, we're kind of on the honor system, not to be saving and restoring state, I assume, but do your best and post a screenshot and enter the contest.
And I'm going to try for this contest too, see how far I can get up leaderboards.
I was in it last year and didn't even play a very good game last year, but I'm going to try again this year too.
What was your score last year?
I'm looking at it's on the site there. I think it's 800 something, so not a lot.
Yeah.
Because I know we'll talk about scores in the review, but I know I did better than that this time around. So.
But you play it in emulation.
That's true. That is true. We'll
with
talk
a joystick.
Things to be learned later.
Rick hates the disc.
Oh boy. So in more news, Electronite posted this. William posted this big announcement over on Atari Age. Electronite closing their doors on December 15th. And I read that and went, whoa? Mm-hmm. And, of course, it's true, but it's not true in the sense you're probably thinking. He's moving. So William is moving to Thailand, and, of course, he's taking his company with him. So I imagine after some period of moving in, getting settled, he's going to be selling games again. And I think he mentioned in the thread there, he's going to have to, start a new hunt for local sources for printing, all the stuff that he was doing in Canada. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we wish him well and look forward to seeing new stuff when he gets back on his feet, so to speak.
By the time he gets things back, it'll be like the reintroduction of Paddle Party, and then of course they've got other things in the works like Boulder Dash and Lost Caves of Kraz.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're not gone permanently.
So over again, something on Atari Age. Well, this kind of ties into the last story. Electronite published Paddle Party. I know, Paul, you said you have a copy and have played it a little bit?
Oh, yeah. I picked up a couple copies of it, and I haven't had time to really get in depth with the game yet, but when I did play, I was very impressed. It's a cool game, and the whole presentation, too. The box and the manual, the cart overlays, everything. Really nice.
I received a copy as well. I haven't had a chance to play it yet, though, but it's definitely in the short pile. Got to get to it soon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So anyway, and then regards to that, over on Atari Age, Dave Akers, who goes by the handle Cat's Folly in Atari Age, also a former former Blue Sky Ranger. He's not currently working with Keith or anything, but former Blue Sky Ranger. He posted this little bonus ROM you can download that he called Press 8. And he just commented that he wanted to include it as a weird little Easter egg in the paddle party cart. So he decided to just kind of bundle up and put a proper header on it and just release it as a ROM for people to play with. And it's really just a software. He describes it as a software toy, and that's really about all it is. It's not like there's much gameplay to it, but it fills the screen with 8s. You move around, you blast them, and the 8s fall to the bottom. And I've already seen somebody's put a YouTube video of quote unquote gameplay of it. But yeah, it's just something he gave back to the community. Wanted to drop in there.
That's cool. This is actually the first that I'd heard of it, so I'm gonna have to go download that, check it out.
And so, Cat's Folly, Dave Akers again. Sometime just a day or two later, he posted another thread in a little gameplay video that he's called "Hockey Robots of Death."
Nice.
And basically, the game looks like you're holding an air hockey disc. What do you call
I guess you would call it a paddle.
Yeah, kind of a paddle, I guess, that you're whacking the air hockey disc with.
Right.
So you're moving that around and whacking a little air hockey thing, and it is. So you're kind of moving in the bottom area of the screen, kind of hitting the air hockey puck to the top of the screen where you're taking out robots that are swarming in from the sides and the top, and you're blasting them with this thing. So it looked like a fun little cross between Breakout and air hockey physics or something.
Cool.
Which is kind of neat looking. And so he posted this, and people were like, whoa, what in the world? I mean, the graphics are obviously reminiscent of Paddle Party. And someone said, is this an Easter egg of Paddle Party? And he later on in the thread confirmed, yep, this is an Easter egg in the Paddle Party game somewhere.
Nice.
So it'll be interesting to see who unlocks that, who finds the magic to unlock that within the game. But it was a cool little video.
Yeah, I'd heard there's a few Easter eggs in the game. I've not played it enough to discover them, but that's pretty cool. We really think that's a neat idea. It's becoming the Dave Akers segment here, but very good.
Right.
Great work. And speaking of, yes, yet another story about Dave Akers. Hasn't happened yet, but I'm doing my best to line up an interview with him so we can talk about not only his new stuff, but stuff he did back in the day.
Yeah, you're going to have to see if you can at least weasel out how many Easter eggs are in there. I doubt he'll tell you how to get to them all, but...
Yeah, he probably won't, but what fun would that be? Come on, Rick. Play.
Hey, we've already established I'm not very good at these games. So.
That's true.
So over at Cinemassacre.com, that's the guys that put out the Angry Video Game Nerds stuff. They do other types of videos there too. But they have a series of games called James and Mike Play, and they've been doing a series where they play Atari games. And so they've done various classics, this and that and the other. And it's usually a longish video, 20, 30 minutes of them just trying game after game after game. And so they did an episode where they did only games that had either the word space or star in the title. And so they came across Space Attack, which is the M Network version of Space Battle. And it was just kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say painful, but I'm going to say painful to watch them trying to figure this out because it has the radar screen. And that's all they're seeing. They're kind of wiggling the stick around and pressing the button, and I can see them kind of highlighting the enemy fleet. And somehow he sent a squadron out, and they're like, "What is this?" Because they just see these dotted lines and these dots moving around and stuff. And so it shows them getting frustrated with it. I don't even know what's happening here. They're talking back and forth, and at one point, his fleet hits the enemy, his squadron hits the enemy fleet, and they're flashing. And of course, those of us who played Space Battle know time to get to the battle screen. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how, I've never played the M Network version. So something you do with the joystick says go, and all of a sudden whoosh, they're in the space screen, and they all go whoa. Both of them are like, "Hey, what's this?" And of course, they're on the screen for all of 3 seconds before they get blasted by an enemy thing, because they don't know to move the crosshairs out of the way and all the stuff that you got to do. And so in the back of the radar screen, they're like, "What happened?"
What was that brief flash of game that we saw?
Exactly. Like, how do we get back to that? How do we make that happen again? So it was kind of amusing, and they actually looked at the screen and said, "We don't know how to play this game. We're moving on."
Definitely one of those games you need the instructions for.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever played that version on the 2600.
Pretty amusing.
That's funny. I gotta check that out. I haven't seen it. All right. So in other news, the box art for the Tron Complete multi-cart was posted over on Atari Age. Really nicely done.
Yeah, it looks good.
Yeah, very Tron-esque.
And I think that, I've definitely put my name in for, reserve me a copy that you do over there in the threads and such. And I got a little postcard in the mail from, again, Revolutionika. Rev, as we call him for short. I got a little fun little postcard of Tron something rather, and it had, the revolution, blah, 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 like his little tagline and stuff. It was kind of cool to get something neat like that in the mail.
Yeah, that's nice. He's very active in promoting Intellivision stuff. He's promoted our show as well, so thanks, Rev. Yeah, he's kind of like the go-to guy for Intellivision news. It's kind of fun. He's all over Twitter and posting on Facebook and I actually I messaged him on Atari Age a while back. Maybe he could contribute some news stories for our show. And of course, that's open to anybody who's listening. If you guys have any Intellivision related news stories you want to send us, feel free to do so. hello@intellivisionaries.com. And we'll credit you and we'll talk about it.
Hi, this is Rick Levine, programmer of Microsurgeon and Truckin' and other games for Intellivision. And you're listening to Intellivisionaries.
I know what you say, and I know what you mean.
The Intellivisionaries interview.
So this is Rick Reynolds, and I'm here with Phil Boland. Did I say that right, Phil?
Correct.
All right. Who is the creator of an Intellivision-related project? I'll say it that way, and I'll let him describe what he's got going on. So what are you making?
Well, it's officially called the Super Video Arcade Overlay Set. And what it is a set of overlays that is designed to look like the Sears Telegames release of Mattel Intellivision games.
Right.
And Sears had their own boxes for the games, but they never had their own overlays. So they would use the standard Mattel cartridges with the labels, and they'd use the same overlays. They weren't Sears branded. Right. And to be honest, this whole project was totally fan driven. This was not my idea.
Oh, yeah.
So just so you know, it was actually started by several guys on Atari Age. They were the ones who put the bug in my ear to do this. And it actually outgrew from another project which I was doing, which I was thinking about making reproduction overlays. And then I decided, it might not be such a great idea since Intellivision Productions is actually active.
Sure.
So I didn't want to step on their feet or anything like that. So somebody suggested, I believe it was C-Mart 604 and Outlaw Torn 71. They actually sent me, I didn't even ask. They just said, hey, I want to send you this because we really like the idea of you doing this Sears set. They sent me some boxed Sears games for inspiration.
Oh, yeah, cool.
And I said, okay, that's fine. I mean, if you guys are gonna do that, I've never had somebody in a community like that do that for me. So I thought, now I'm obligated to do this. So I decided, okay, let's do this. And I dove in. So it was a matter of looking at all the boxes and trying to make the overlay set basically match what would Sears have done at that time to make it match. Notice I'm being careful not to say back in the day. I did listen to your I did listen to some of your other podcasts.
Oh, that's funny. So why don't I take a step back a little bit and ask you a little bit about Intellivision in general?
Sure.
What's your history with Intellivision? How did you get involved with it? Are you a collector?
I grew up around video games. Grew up in the late 70s, early 80s. That's when I grew up. I never actually owned an Intellivision at that time. That was not something our family had. I actually grew up with an Odyssey 2.
Oh, yeah.
And before that was a Pong unit. It actually was a Radio Shack Pong unit.
Sure.
Intellivision was always one of those systems that you eyeballed and said, wow, I really wish I could have one of those. And it was always, we don't have the money for that, so you're going to have to just make do with what you got.
Ah.
So it wasn't until I actually started collecting on my own when I got out of college in the mid-90s that I actually purchased my first Intellivision. So that's basically where, and then I must have had 7 or 8 of them at the time. So that's my history of Intellivision. I
was just going to ask, so is Intellivision your main retro platform at this point, or do you do is it just one of several that you're working with, playing on, and stuff like that?
Believe it or not, I actually play the Odyssey 2 a lot.
That's cool, yeah.
It's not something that most people say, hey, what's your favorite classic system? Most people don't go, it's the O2. Well, mine is. I don't know if it's just one of those nostalgia things, but I actually enjoy it. I play it. The only time I play Intellivision is when I have my buddy over, who he grew up with Intellivision.
Yeah, I think that's how it tracks. Whatever you grew up with, is what you really still enjoy. I had a friend with an Odyssey 2, and he lived a little further away in terms of walking to his house, so we only got over there a little bit. But he was one of the ones who got Casey Munchkin before they were forced to stop selling it. Yeah. So really enjoyed that because that came out ahead of the Atari Pac-Man cartridge. And, we had it too before they got it. I remember getting it brand new, and there was 2 people on the street that had an Odyssey 2, and there was 2 people on the street that had an Atari VCS, because back then they called it VCS. They didn't call it 2600. Exactly.
And it was when we had that game, it made us feel like we had something better than the 2600, because it was just a better version of Pac-Man at the time.
Yeah. It's still a fun game. I enjoy that one.
Yes.
So, why the Sears set? Like, do you just have a particular? I mean, you kind of mentioned earlier that folks kind of goaded you into it, but do you have an affinity for the Sears variants, or?
Well, it's kind of a odd story how I actually got into making overlays to begin with.
Oh, sure. That I'm interested in that too.
What happened was, like I said before, at one time I had a very large collection of home video game systems. I started collecting in the mid-90s. Basically, you get out of college, you don't have the kids yet, so you got this money burning holes in your pocket. And back then, I could go to the local secondhand stores, which around here was basically Goodwill and Salvation Army. And then you could pick up stuff also cheap. I mean, systems were like $3 to $5. Cartridges started at $0.25. And so when you did that, you were buying up all kinds of stuff, and you'd have this whole stuff. I think my basement was covered in that stuff at one time. Long story short, we get to the early 2000s. Unfortunately, I had to get rid of most of my collection because of family situations changed, other situations changed.
Sure.
And what happened was I wanted to get back into collecting, but I just did not have the money at the time. I still don't really have a lot of money to put towards it, but somehow I squeaked some things out here and there. So I decided, well, maybe I'll get into the paraphernalia. And so actually the first thing I started doing was posters. And I had what I considered a large format printer at the time, which could do 13 by 19. Okay. And I started printing stuff for myself. And then I decided, I'm going to do cartridge labels, because nobody had ever done really good cartridge labels. Did that. And then, I don't know, something just said, I probably had 4 ColecoVisions at one time, and I don't think I ever had a full complement of overlays, and I knew they didn't have many for the system. So I said, you know what? I want to find a way to make these myself so I can just say I had them. That was the whole reason for doing it. And actually that was an adventure in itself, trying to figure out how to do the overlay and make it feel authentic. And once I figured that one out, it was a no-brainer. I'm thinking, wow, all these guys, all of a sudden they're saying they don't have good ways of making overlays. I figured it out. I'll sell you some, Wow, and that's how I got into making overlays in general.
So you talked about doing posters and things like that, and then labels. Is your background an artist, or do you consider yourself an artist?
No, I don't consider myself an artist. Believe it or not, my background is in mechanical engineering.
Oh.
So my drawing prowess comes from technical drawings, not artistic drawings.
Okay.
So what I done, I picked what artistic like stuff I do. I basically picked up on my own over several years, you know, and it was all done for personal projects.
Sure. So I don't have a lot of insight into the ColecoVision library. Did most of their games come with overlays the way the Intellivision games did, or was it more of a side thing with that system?
No, not. As a matter of fact, there's only a handful of games that actually have an overlay for the ColecoVision. That was one of the reasons why I decided to tackle that one, because I figured it wouldn't be that difficult to get them all.
And so at that time, were you trying to make reproductions of the originals?
Yes, because the only one I ever had at the time was one for Mousetrap.
Sure, that makes sense.
And I had a Spy Hunter cartridge at one time, but I never had the overlay that went with it. So it was a matter of trying to get the overlay. And the trick there is to get in the artwork. But I don't just take the scan of the artwork. I tend to redraw the artwork, because the truth is a lot of the stuff you get, especially from overlays, and this is true for Intellivision overlays too. Over the years, it's hard to find a pristine overlay, and to find that pristine overlay and then scan it in extremely high res and then hope it prints out really good. The problem is it's the idea of a copy of a copy of a copy.
Right.
Every time you copy it, it diminishes the quality somewhat. So what I decided to do is I'd scan these in and I'd actually try to redraw them. I'd redraw over them to clean them up so they'd look better, because I knew that I'd be printing them probably at a slightly higher quality than some of them may have been printed in the past.
Yeah. So you mentioned about how you kind of figured out how to make overlays kind of just on your own by trying things. Have you talked with the other people in the community that have created overlays? Like, you know, some years ago there was a guy who went by the handle of Psycho Stormtrooper that created what he called the Orphan Overlay Set, which was a set of overlays for Intellivision games that had not had them.
Right.
Did you ever end up contacting him, or did you ever?
No, I know of him. I've never contacted him or anything. The way the overlays actually came out was kind of accidental. It was based off of what I was doing with labels, believe it or not. And it actually uses some of the same ideas. It's like 75% the same as other guys have done it. I just do one, you know, the 25% on the back end is a little different than what other guys have done. I realized after most of my information comes off of Atari Age, because that's where I went when I first started doing stuff. And I've seen guys in the past have tried doing, you know, reverse laser printing on transparencies.
Yeah.
But the biggest problem is how do they put the backing on it? And a lot of guys had tried in the past to paint them, put some kind of enamel paint or something on them. Yeah, I didn't want to go down that route.
What you're describing is exactly what I've read. Yeah, they do an inverse image, print it on some kind of plastic clear, right, and then spray paint the back with white or something.
Correct. And the truth is that the reverse transparency printing, that part's perfect. That's what you need to do. It's the white part on the back that I did not like the idea of. I mean, some people had used paint. A lot of people had said, "Oh, I'll just go out and get some really glossy laser paper and do it on that." And it's like, yeah, that'll kind of work. But the problem is eventually that stuff flakes off when that's the stuff on top. What I realized is I actually would laminate my cartridge labels with a system I built myself to do a pressure lamination. And one day I thought, why can't I, if I can just get this material I'm using for lamination, if I can just get it in white, I wonder if I could put it on top of the transparency, because I would speed it up. You don't have to worry about it flaking off. I got some. I first put it on by hand, and I quickly realized, well, it's not going to work putting it on by hand because too many air bubbles get under it.
Right.
And that's when I realized this has to be more on a roll or a spool, and it has to be pinched as it goes. And so I made this piece of equipment, went to the hardware store, bought some stuff, put it together, has basically a rubber roller on it. I got what I'm using for my lamination material, and I actually feed the transparencies in upside down, and as it goes in, it actually pressure laminates the white on the back as it goes. And there's no bubbles. It's perfectly pressed in, And the beauty of that was it actually helped me do my labels even faster and better, because now I got this process I can use for both the labels and the overlays, and it's just a matter of changing out the lamination material. So it worked out, and that's what I ended up doing. So yeah, it's 75% the same as what other guys did. The only difference is I put the lamination on the back instead of painting it. But it was getting to that point was the trick.
Sure.
And it was just by happenstance that because I was laminating labels, I'm sitting there looking at them, and all of a sudden that light bulb goes off in your head. Why can't I do the same over here? You know?
So you kind of did all this kind of on your own over in a corner, so to speak, without I don't want to make it sound like you weren't interested in listening to the rest of the community, but I've always been curious as to how all the different well, you know, like I say, people like you, people like Psycho Stormtrooper, people like David Harley, who does the Intelligent Vision, and then you know, Electronite and Left Turn Only. You know, they're all putting out overlays, and
Right.
I do know that some of them share work with each other. Like, you know, they'll help each other with boxes or printers or, you know, whatever they're doing. But I kind of wondered if there was kind of a collective community learning how to do all of these things, and that, you know, we as a community had all kind of finally figured out how to do overlays. But you're describing like you kind of learned it on your own. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, there was some information that was publicly available on Atari Age. I saw the guys doing the reverse transparency printings.
Right.
And that's where I got that information. Everything else, though, basically coming up with the idea of doing it, I came up with that on my own. It's just something I like to do. I'm an engineer,
Sure. Yeah.
you know, by trade. So I love to tinker, and I like to figure out things on my own. So it wasn't... Let's put it this way. I knew I couldn't go up to like FedEx Kinko's and say, hey, you know, can you make me something like this? And I know some of the guys do that, and that's cool that they've been able to find somebody who can do that. But, you know, I was trying to keep this a truly DIY process.
Okay. Yeah, I was actually going to ask if you were using any, you know, professional printers to do any of the printing for you.
No, I do my own printing. I mean, I don't give out all my secrets. Notice I keep saying lamination material, and I don't tell you what that is.
And that's certainly fine.
And the truth is when you guys find out, it's going to be one of those V8 moments.
Uh-huh.
And so that's why I keep my mouth shut about it, because once I say it, you know, everybody in the world's going to be attempting it too.
Well, we'd love to drag the secret out of you, but I won't put the screws to you.
In time, I'll let everybody know, because I'm actually proud of the laminator I made.
That's cool.
But to give you an idea of the equipment I use for the most expensive piece of equipment I got is the color laser printer I bought, which really wasn't all that expensive considering it's a laser printer. I think I spent $400 on it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's a Samsung CLP 620 ND printer, and that's what I use for the laser printing. For labels, I use an Epson Stylus Photo 1400, which is a larger format. It's not a large format printer; it's just larger. It does up to 13 by 19.
Well, I just found it interesting, you know, like I mentioned, the different companies that have put out releases, and just as I've pulled out a few of the homebrew releases I have, and I mean, at this point, what the different people are putting out, the different little outfits that are publishing games, they're really putting out nice overlays. I mean, they feel good in your hand. They feel as professional as anything that was being put out in the 80s. But as I look at one of my older ones, and I certainly don't mean to denigrate anybody, but I do have a 2007 version of Space Patrol from Left Turn Only, and it's a very different process. It doesn't have a solid color background, for instance, on it. It feels a little thicker and heavier in my hand.
Right.
I actually kind of think it's cool, but it's definitely not the same, you know, as what other people are doing. So you can kind of see a change, and as people are learning how different techniques to make the overlays.
Well, I think in 2007, I just don't think some of the technology was there, but I don't think most people had it in their house at the time. Let's put it that way. It was there, but people didn't know of it yet. And you know, most of these people, look, what happens is somebody's going to say, I want overlays. And the first thing they're going to do is they're going to go run to a printer, somebody who does it professionally. And they're going to say, hey, can you do this? And you're going to find out really quickly that a lot of these guys can't do that exactly the same way. They're going to try to tell you, oh, let's print it on vinyl. You know, we'll print them on some kind of, you know, more rigid vinyl. But that means the printing's going to be on top of the vinyl. So you're going to feel it. It's not going to feel quite right. Then the other, you know, again, we'll use some glossy laser paper. We'll try that, and then you could laminate that. That might work, but the problem is that makes it really thick. It'll work. All those will work. It's just how authentic do you want it to be?
And it's interesting. I was looking at some overlays for my boxed copy of Microsurgeon by Imagic, and I noticed that at the very bottom, just what you were describing earlier, the backing had flaked away.
Right.
So whatever process they were using, had that same flaw.
My understanding of the process, it was hard to get some of this information, but my understanding is most of that was silk screened.
Okay.
From back in the day, they would actually silk screen those images on transparency, and so the white is a type of silk screening ink.
Gotcha.
But people love. I personally like the Intellivision. I like the texture of the Intellivision overlays.
Yeah.
And for those who have been asking, no, I cannot recreate them yet. I don't know how to get that textured transparency.
So, you mentioned about kind of recreating these to get back to the Sears, the thing you're actually making, the Sears set. You're creating overlays in a style that is very close to what Sears potentially would have done had they made overlays.
Yes.
And just as a side, I always thought it interesting. They had completely different artwork for their boxes, completely different print runs for the manuals. But then the overlays, like you're describing, were just the stock Mattel overlays, and of course the carts. Actually, I think they had different labels on the carts.
No, actually, they were the same as the Mattel.
Okay. See, I'm just not.
But I was quite surprised at that. Again,
Yes,
because I wasn't the Intellivision collect. I didn't.
Yeah.
I never paid attention to that level of detail with it.
It just struck me as odd that, well, gee whiz, you went this far. You printed boxes, you printed manuals. Why didn't you bother with the overlays too?
You would think, yeah.
Or contract with whoever Mattel was contracting for, whatever's going on at the time. So it's a neat idea in terms of a homebrew kind of product to put out there. Okay, so you talked about making these yourself, kind of in a basement, I assume, or a shop or something. So how many of these can you make at a time, and how many of the Sears sets are you planning on releasing?
Well, I'm only going to release 100 total. That's it, and that is. First of all, it's the reason for the 100 mark is, one, it takes me a while to make these because this is actually a handmade product. Two, by having it at 100, it maintains that collectability that a lot of the really diehard Intellivision guys, I think, are looking for. And that's true with any segment of the classic video game, be it Atari and Coleco and television, whatever. They want that's something special. And it's just not something special if you've always got this ongoing, I always got them in stock. Here they are. Just let me know. Here it is 3 years later, and I still got 20 I'm holding on to. So I decided to make it limited run. I learned that lesson from actually another project I did for the Coleco. So and just in case anybody's wondering, I do hold on to one copy of my own. And I do that on purpose in case they come up on eBay down the road. I can throw mine up real quick and make the $1,000.
There you go. So I believe I saw on Atari Age you were taking pre-order names, or who wants in on this. Are you near the 100? Are there any sets left?
Well, I did this in two. I'm doing this I did it in two parts, and the first part was 60 copies. I got the 60 copies done, the very first 6 copies done. I've sold those out. I sold those out in 24 hours.
Wow.
That's how much the community wanted them. And for those wanting to know, it was about 30 people, about 28 to 30 people who bought those 60 copies. I had somebody ask me, so I figured I'd just state it.
Sure. I've noticed that there's some collectors that always just buy 2 of everything.
Yes. So. Yes. And the other 40 I decided to do on demand. And the reason I did that is because I really wasn't 100% sure if I could sell 100 copies of this. So I thought, I'll sell the 60. If there's people who still want it, I'll put them on a waiting list, and it'll take me, 2 to 3 weeks to turn this around to get those other copies out, and then they can have a copy. So the way I did the first 60, it was basically first come, first serve via PM on Atari Age. That's how I do it. That's the best way I could come up with it. I thought, first come, first serve via PM order.
Sure.
That's who gets it. So I did that. And with the additional 40, though, I'm doing a little differently. I'm basically telling people there are only 40 copies to be had on the reserve. And if you want one, you will have to PM me. Once you PM me, you're officially on the list. I will tell you you're officially on the list. And basically, you are guaranteed, if you truly do want to buy it when the time comes, to have a copy. So when I'm done making these, I'm actually going to personally PM every single one of those people on the list. If they decide at that point not to pay, then I will put them up publicly.
Gotcha.
So I did that because basically they missed the first go-around. There was obviously a reason they missed the first go-around. So we'll make these rules a little bit different, so it makes it a little bit easier for them to actually guarantee that copy if they really want it.
And do you want to talk about how many of those 40 are gone at this point? Or
At this point, there are 19 of them reserved of the 40.
Okay.
And that literally right before we started this interview, right before we started this recording, what's today's date? November whatever.
November the 14th.
Correct. Literally 5 minutes before I got on with you, somebody reserved the 19th copy.
All right, so people listening to the podcast, of course, I don't know when this is going to get into the podcast. So it may, when you're listening to this now, whatever the distance is between now and November 14th, you can gauge whether or not it seems likely there'll be one of those 21 left.
Correct.
Well, it's a really cool project. I know I put my name in. I'm interested in having a set. They certainly look good. The postings you've put, just kind of like it's not a screenshot. It's a picture of what you're planning to produce. So they look really good. I do think you've captured the style of the Sears kind of 1980s look of those Sears games. So I'm looking forward to getting a set myself. Although, quite frankly, I'll probably just look at them. I don't think I'll ever put them in a controller just because I want to keep them nice.
Well, it's funny you said that, because if you do decide to put them in a controller, all right, I can honestly tell you that the method I've got that I'm using were tested. I actually had I picked a couple guys to test them for me, and I did the same test myself. So there'd be 3 people testing them. Only one of the 2 guys got back to me, but basically what I had them do is I came up with this, what I called a cycle when testing this. This is like some really detailed stuff, so I don't know if you guys are going to fall asleep hearing this, but basically I told them, I said, I want you to put the overlay in, press every button on the keypad, take the overlay out. That's one cycle. Mm-hmm. And I told them to do that 50 times.
Okay.
And then they had to write back to me what the condition of the overlay was, because I figured, as a collector's item, are people going to use it more than 50 times? I don't know.
Right.
I was concerned, would the lamination start to come off? How much scratching would there be on it? According to my test, the things seemed like they were rock solid.
That's great.
There was some really minor scratching that you could only see if you just held it just right in the light, which was basically the same as the original ones, from putting it in and out. But I never had a problem with it. It practically looked brand new. And luckily, the one guy who wrote me back was totally amazed. It looked practically brand new after the 50 cycles. So he was a believer at that point.
Well, sounds good. So you've done this. You've kind of got a process for making overlays. Do you have any plans in the future to? You talked before about possibly making reproduction overlays of the original game ones, or if Intelligent Vision or LTO or Electronite or whatever came up to you and said, "Hey, would you like to make a run of 300 for this new game we're going to do?" Is that something you're interested in, or are you like, I've had enough of these overlays. I want to be done.
No, I'll give it a shot.
Okay, cool.
I'm willing. To me, it's kind of cool because I came up with the part of the process, and the majority of the process that makes the lamination part. And I know it sounds bad, but I just kind of think it's cool that I'm using this machine that I built with my own 2 hands, and I'm getting these things to work. So
it definitely sounds cool.
And so that's what I did. Yeah, I'll talk to him. To him. Like I said, I've already done. There's been a couple homebrewers in the ColecoVision scene I've already done orders for. Cool. And one guy's a repeater. He's a repeat customer. So
what do you think the again, haven't thought about this overlay project more than I have. What do you think I don't want to say the market for, but like one thing I've always wanted was a way to get overlays for games that I play a lot, that I'm wearing them out, get a second set. Now, the only way to do that right now is find a good looking set on an eBay, a game of where someone's listed the game and the overlays look good in their pictures. But you've obviously got the wherewithal to create them if you wanted to. Do you think that there'd be any market for what I'm describing? Hey, I need a couple overlays for basketball or something like that.
That is exactly why I started making the Intellivision overlays when I first started making them, and that's the ones I decided to stop. It's ironic you should say that because I'm actually sitting on all these reproduction overlays that I'm afraid to sell.
You're worried about the intellectual property issues.
Yes. I mean, I'm actually keeping them. By the way, for those that haven't figured it out yet, just a side note, you can actually display your overlays fairly easily using trading card inserts for binders, because that's how I hold mine. Just in case you guys haven't figured that one out. I would think it's a no-brainer by this point, but just in case there's some new people listening, I would highly suggest you get yourself some trading card sheets, and as the best place to hold them, because that's where my overlays are sitting right now. And yeah, I got them all. I got Astros, man. They look just like the originals, and I've got them, but they're not the originals. The only thing that makes them different is there's a little PRTD 2012 printed on the very bottom in really small text on them.
Yeah, that way it's the reproduction, not no one's going to accuse you of passing it off as a rare, collectible, pristine, whatever.
Correct, and I did that on purpose because there's actually a story behind that.
Is that something you want to tell, or is that something that's
that's fine. I'm going to leave names out. I'm going to leave the name out of the game cartridge.
That's fine.
But this was before I was really doing overlays. I was still doing labels, and I still do labels, by the way, in case anybody's wanting to purchase some. I prefer doing custom labels. I had somebody who asked me, I started realizing this over time. After a while, I realized this is the same MO I get from people who are a little shady, but I did not know this at the time. I was naive. I didn't know. Person contacts me, says he wants this label for this game he's got, and it's a rare game, and this is for his personal collection. I say, okay. He told me he was willing to pay, I think it was like $20 for the label, 15, wow. $20. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And I asked him what it was, and he gave me some pictures of what it was supposed to look like. And dumb me, I did not go and research the title that he gave me. I started making it because I was just excited that I was able to pull this off and make it look really good. I'm getting all proud of myself, and I wasn't even thinking ahead. And went and made it, and he actually came back and ordered another one. And after the second one, he stopped. And I don't know what, it was almost like a little voice in my head said, check eBay. I go on eBay, and there sits his cart that he said was in pristine condition with original label, and he wanted something like $500 for it. And that's when I got this sick feeling in my stomach that this wasn't a good idea.
Yeah, sure.
And I immediately contacted him. He took it down because he says it was an accident. Could it have been? I guess it could have been. I don't want to second guess him because I don't know him personally. But from that point on, I decided to start putting some kind of mark on everything I do so I could never be accused of trying to push this off. And actually, that's been a point of contention with some people I've had buy labels from me.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that in other contexts too. I'm involved in another community another gaming community that does textile adventure games, and there are concerns about reproduction of documentation and stuff like that, and what can we put on it, watermark it in some way or something like that, so it's not no one can ever be accused of trying to prop it up as an original and get a lot of money for a pristine copy of an original. Right,
and so especially when you're doing something that's a reproduction. I.e., something like what I've done a lot of reproduction labels for is ColecoVision games. I can't put a copyright on it because technically I don't own the copyright to that image. So what I decided to do is literally for a time I had a fictitious name for a printing company that I called HOTZ, H-O-T-Z, because it looked kind of like Topps cards, And I did that because I had a card series I put out for ColecoVision at one time, and I was trying to make it look authentic. I decided to try to put that logo in the corner at the very bottom of the label, so you basically wouldn't see it if it was in the system. And then I just decided to put PRTD in the year that it was printed. I figured that'd be more innocuous. It would be more out of the way so people wouldn't notice it right away. But if you're sitting there looking at it, you might say, wait a minute, what's this? I don't remember these being on the original, you know. So it basically gives an idea of when it was printed.
Yeah, and all that's necessary is that it never fools an expert, right? You never want to
right.
You never want to be accused of trying to put one over on the community at large. Yeah, so.
Yeah, but sometimes that's not good enough. I mean, again, if you want to take the time, you go over in the ColecoVision area on Atari Age. There's a ColecoVision labels thread that I started that has these labels I put up. I put them up for free for the community at the time. I actually put in some markers in the label. This was before I was actually marking it with like PRTD or the little logo or something that I thought would have been obvious for any major collector to see, but apparently it wasn't. So, like, for one, when I'm not going to sit there and try to describe it, but well, I better since I opened my mouth. But on the ColecoVision cartridge, you got this white like outline that goes all the way around the label where the title is. And if you look at the corners of that white outline, you'll notice they look thicker. They look a little odd from the rest of it. I did that on purpose so I'd know at a glance if it was a label I did. And that's why I did it. And also the text on the fine print is not exactly the same. I used a text font that was similar but not exactly the same. Mm-hmm. And the dead giveaway is the way it writes the lowercase a.
Gotcha.
So that was the markers. I thought, oh, this will be perfect. Those are good enough. People will know. No, it wasn't. I still had some people who did not like that. They thought it was too close.
Oh,
so,
okay.
And that's when I started doing the print date.
Well, okay, there you go. Well, I think that is the set of questions I had. I do find overlay printing interesting. Like I said, it's always been kind of the back of my brain. I know that there are some games that I don't have any pristine overlays for, just because it's a rare game, and I was lucky to get the one I got, and
right.
the ones I got are kind of have distended a little bit from use or something like that. Mm-hmm. So I've always fantasized about being able to buy a complete set of Intellivision overlays, repros. But I also know that's a lot of work in terms of you're doing 2 overlays per game. you're not benefiting a lot from like a mass run of something.
Correct. As a matter of fact, one other thing, I think I might have given the wrong impression. I think there's a couple people out there who think I use a cutting machine,
okay.
like a computer controlled cutting machine for these mm-hmm. overlays. I do not. I use it's something anybody can buy at an office supply store. It is I call it a cutting machine, but it is a cutting board with a circular cutting blade.
Oh, okay.
That's all it is. That's all I use, and I use corner dies. So if I can't get it with the cutting board and the corner dies, out comes a metal ruler and an X-Acto knife. Mm-hmm. Just to give you an idea that this is truly a handmade. Again, this is done so people understand this is not some mass-produced
right
thing. It's truly a hand-done product, and so it's truly DIY.
All right. Thanks so much for talking with us. It was very cool to hear about this. It's a real neat thing you're doing in terms of the community. It's a neat project.
Yeah, it is fun, and I appreciate you taking this time to talk to me. And if I ever come up with any other cool projects and you guys want to talk to me, you're always welcome to. I have no problem talking about it.
All right, great. Thanks.
Thank you.
I know what you say, and I know what you mean.
All right, so this month's game is Christmas Carol versus the Ghost of Christmas Presents. So this was a release that came out last December of 2012. A new game for the Intellivision, first homebrew that we're covering, that we're reviewing. So that's kind of fun. It was put out by Joe Zabicek's Left Turn Only, and programmed by James Pujals. So we have an interview with James in the can already. So that's going to be in the episode here. So that was really fun to do. So the game is it's a take on running through a maze, picking things up kind of a game, kind of Pac-Man-esque in that sense. And it basically involves you as a Christmas elf picking up presents that have been stolen by the ghost of Christmas presents. The ghost has hidden them in these ice caverns, but unfortunately in the ice caverns lurks a deadly snowman who will kill you. So it's, you run around, you grab the presents. Once you get all the presents on the screen, you move on to the next level. But unlike Pac-Man and other maze consuming type games, the maze is sparsely populated. There are a dozen or so presents on the screen, and mostly empty corridors, except for little candies that are on the floor, which you can pick up. But the candies are merely the candy pieces act as bonuses rather than integral to passing the level. All you need to collect is the presents themselves. So, although with the candy pieces, if you manage to get all of the candy pieces and the presents, and you don't lose a life on the board, it awards you a little bonus. And this little perfect comes up on the screen, and so you've cleared the stage perfectly, the board perfectly. And so that's how the game works, and that alone makes it kind of an interesting game to have. I think it's very retro feel in terms of moving around a maze and picking things up, but it definitely has some twists added into that. Firstly, unlike Pac-Man where there's 4 enemies chasing you, there's only 2 enemies in the maze with you. One is the ghost of Christmas presents, and the other is this sadistic kind of a snowman. I don't know if he gives him I guess he calls him the evil snowman.
He looks evil. He's kind of creepy.
Yes. Oh man, I think he's darn scary in this sport.
The way he's very fast. The way he kind of wobbles when he comes at you, and the sound that announces his arrival.
Yeah, there's a scream of sorts that makes this whistling sound when he's ready to come on. So he comes on. He doesn't start in the maze. Start the board. He comes in at some point after some delay, and so you have some time to run around picking things up before the snowman is after you. But he is faster than you in all incarnations, so you get in a foot race with him, and he's going to get you. So from that perspective, I don't know. I always find him a little intimidating when I'm playing. But interestingly enough, he's the only one of the 2 enemies that can kill you. The ghost doesn't kill you. What the ghost does is which is so unnerving. The ghost returns every present that you've picked up on the board back to its starting location. So the ghost, effectively, if you get touched by the ghost, you're reset on the board.
So annoying.
Oh my goodness! I don't know how many times I've sworn at that ghost.
I've had him come after me like 3 times in a row.
I know, you're like, leave me, come on. Oh my goodness, yeah. So it's weird because he's not deadly, but man, does he become frustrating as an opponent in this thing. So that's an interesting dynamic, right? There's only 1 enemy on the board that can kill you. Like Pac-Man, there are power pellet-esque things. In this case, they're power snowflakes. And when you hit the snowflakes, it makes the ghost lose track of where you are, and he kind of spins in place and loses track of his sanity or something. And it causes the ghost to run away from you in fear. And the animation is cool. The animation changes. Did I say the ghost run away? I meant the snowman runs away.
Yeah, he tends to go in the opposite direction he was headed when that happens. Correct.
He turned very much Pac-Man-esque, actually, in terms of, in Pac-Man, you hit an energizer, they all immediately reverse direction. And so he turns around, but also the animations change. When he's running around the maze, his arms, which are twig arms on the sides of the snowman, they kind of wave up and down as he's chasing you. But when he's in retreat mode or whatever, his arms stay down, and he kind of looks more like he's submissive or something as he's running away from you. So there's definitely some attention paid to detail like that. There's a lot of attention paid to detail in this game. And it's really, the animations are very well done. They look cartoonesque almost, and it's just really, really well done with the graphic resolution you're getting.
On the TV that I've been playing on, I don't really notice the arms as much.
Yeah, they're dark brown colored, right? So against the black background, they're harder to see. I could see that for sure.
Yeah, I'm playing on a really small TV too, so.
Okay.
Yeah, but the animations, just touching on that, it's great. I mean, just like, for example, when he does catch you and your character, Carol, she sort of like stiffens up, turns blue, and crumbles into a little pile of, frozen bits, and there's a nice little sound accompanying all that, and it's
that's a great sound effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got these kind of gameplay elements, and that alone, I think, again, would make this a pretty respectable game. But then on that, there are 8 different maze configurations that he's grouped into stages, 1 through 8, and each stage you play 2 boards of. So you'll play boards 1 and 2, make up stage 1, then boards 3 and 4 make up stage 2, and so on up to stage 8. And each one of these mazes that you play is slightly different. And so, of course, the first time you approach them, there's going to be a certain strategy you can apply to these different mazes, what areas of the maze to concentrate on first. After you've played the maze a few times, you start realizing where the snowman's going to come out, because it always enters from one of the tunnel entrances. And so you can know on board X he's going to come out over on the right-hand side or on the left-hand side, so I don't want to be near there when it's time for him to enter, stuff like that. So there's a lot of room for some strategy here, and I do want to go through the stages, and I wrote up a quick description of some of the stuff in each of these that'd be kind of fun to talk about. But then again, I'm kind of building this up. Even after all of that, stage 8 changes the gameplay dynamic quite a bit and functions like a boss level. So stage 8, which would be boards 15 and 16, if you get that far, the enemies actually change. You're no longer running from the snowman and the ghost, but you're running from a snowball and what he calls the bad toy, and it's very similar. Again, you're still running around getting presents. The dynamics are all the same, but the strategies you apply are very different, because the characters behave differently, and the strategies to apply them are different, in the sense that as soon as to make it specific, as soon as the snowman touches you, you're dead. But on the boss level, there's no snowman, there's a snowball. The snowball, when he sees you, he kind of lifts himself into the air and throws himself at you. And you have to get hit 3 times by the snowball before you die. So that's a different dynamic, and it just changes the way you attack the board, and there's a lot of depth, I guess is what I'm trying to say to this game.
Definitely, yeah, and some of there's a whole story that's told in little intermissions every 2 screens, or I believe that there's another little intermission that kind of plays out the story, and you see the little bad toy, the little robot guy in one of those little intermissions come out and kind of zap Carol, and you see her skeleton, and it's really, really creative the way the whole thing was put together, and there's a lot of thought put into the details, and especially, like you said, the animations and the graphics.
Yeah, and James goes through, in the interview we have with him, he goes through a little bit about what he was trying to accomplish with this, but it does kind of tell a loose story as you're playing the game through these little cutscenes. All right, so we mentioned that the structure of the game is in these 8 stages, 2 boards per stage, and prior to each stage, you get this little animated, sort of like a cutscene, and the animations are really well done, and as we mentioned, and it just go through. So the first cutscene you see is at the beginning of the game, before the first board, and it shows Carol walk across the screen. She's within an ice tunnel of sorts, followed by the ghost, kind of introducing you to 2 of the main characters. Then when you get to the third board, after the second board's completed, you get another cutscene starting the third into the new stage. And Carol walks across. You hear the scream of the snowman, Carol runs away, but then what comes out onto the screen is the ghost with holding the snowman sticks to the sides as if they are his arms, like the snowman's arms. He laughs a little bit as if he's fooled Carol, and then accidentally drops one of the sticks. And it's actually kind of humorous because it seems like it gives you an idea that he's mischievous and maybe not quite all that together and competent as a character.
But and just to mention that reaction from Carol when she hears that sound, though, that's pretty good too. The animation.
Yeah,
on
it's
that.
like an animation of her being startled.
Yeah.
And so then the next cutscene you see before for the third stage, the ghost basically is crossing the screen with the snowman stick arms on his head like little reindeer antlers, and the snowman's chasing him as if to get his arms back. And eventually, you suppose off screen the ghost lost the snowman, and he reappears by himself with the antlers, and then a little red nose appears on his face, blinking, making a very Rudolph kind of imagery, and he smiles at you, the viewer. So again, kind of giving you some characterization of this character being kind of mischievous.
Yeah, you really get a feel for what these characters are. They're not just these anonymous little blobs on the screen.
Right. The next pre-cut scene for stage 4, Carol has started to collect gifts in an ice cavern and is placing the next one. And there's a handle on the front. The handle starts rotating, and you can hear Pop Goes the Weasel playing. And this is obviously a Jack-in-the-Box, but apparently Carol wasn't expecting that and is confused by what this might do. When the head pops up on the Jack-in-the-Box, Carol is surprised and startled that she turns white and faints backwards.
Yeah, that one is funny.
Just a little comedic thing there. The stage 5 pre-cut animation shows the snowman chases Carol across the screen, and then off screen you hear this sound of a flame flashing up, and then you see the snowman running back across the screen, doing the same animation he does when you're, when you've got the power snow pellets, running the power snowflake. When he runs back across, obviously frightened, and Carol walks on carrying a lit fiery torch, and so you get this idea that Carol has found some weapon that could be used against the snowman.
Yeah, and even that torch animation is really well done.
Yeah, it really does.
Everything.
It's flickering. And
That was one of my favorite ones in there.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's really cool. Stage 6 comes up. The scene for that is we're back in the Cavern of Presents again. Carol's bringing another one, and at this point, behind the presents, out pops the toy robot. A toy robot appears there, and Carol kind of looks at it, wondering what it might be. The robot shoots Carol, and Paul mentioned the animation here. You actually see flashing within Carol's body a skeleton. I mean, it's very dramatic looking. And that shot stuns Carol momentarily while that little animation's going. And when Carol can move again, she runs off the screen. So it introduces this character of the robot, lets you know the robot is maybe a little more bad news than the characters we've seen so far.
Yeah.
And it's pretty dramatic, actually. Then for stage 7, you see the snowman, a snowman that is not the game's snowman. It's obviously it's kind of animated a little, or rendered a little bit differently than the bad snowman, and it's just kind of there in the middle of the screen, and you can tell that it's got blue eyes, different than the other animations we've seen so far. The regular snowman, the evil snowman, enters the screen, and you can tell that the eyes on the original snowman, they move a little bit, they blink, they move around just a little bit when the evil snowman is not looking. And the evil snowman raises one of his stick hands up to his forehead as if he's looking around, searching. And so the snowman looks on both sides, and the eyes within the original snowman, I use the word snowman a lot, the evil snowman moves to both sides looking around, and the original snowman, those little eyes kind of watch, and they sit back, then they reset themselves so they don't look like anything had moved when the evil snowman turns around. And then eventually the evil snowman gives up and leaves. The original snowman that was in the center of the screen at the beginning of the animation vibrates and shakes off all the snow to reveal Carol was hiding inside this newer snowman, and ha 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 gets printed above his head. He was able to hide from her head. Her head. I said his. I'm
Yes.
sorry. Her head. Yes. She was able to hide from the evil snowman. With and again, you're so used to blocky graphics on these old platforms. It's so well done. The animation. It's very clear what's happening in this. I'm kind of telling you almost a story that's going on here, and it's not like it's a storybook I've read. It's just this.
Right, and the feel of it is it is almost like you're reading a story, because these like sort of classic reactions. Look one way and somebody does something and you look back, like this old sort of sketch comedy or vaudeville or something. That's
Right.
it comes across completely clear in these little animations.
Yeah.
What's going on.
And so then prior to stage 8, which again, as I mentioned before, is going to be the boss level. You're in that toy cavern again, where Carol has been stacking the toys. The ghost comes in, sees the big pile of toys, excitedly moves very quickly over towards them, but then he gets distracted and notices there's an ice block in the ceiling that's shaking a little bit. The ice block drops on top of him and imprisons him inside the ice block. The robot toy and the snowman then enter. The robot shoots the snowman, which melts the snowman down to just a snowball, which then immediately rolls away. It's not running. Rolls away. Mm-hmm. And then the scene kind of irises in on the robot, and a little thought bubble appears, and he sees Carol, and with a big red X through it. It's very clear the bad toy is now out to get Carol.
Yeah, you know what his intentions are.
Exactly. And that brings you into the boss level. And I had mentioned before about having different enemies to fight. So in the boss level, the ghost is still imprisoned in this ice block in the center of the maze, and now you're having to run away from the bad toy, and then this snowball that was the melted down version of the snowman that had been chasing you the whole thing. And then if you complete the 2 boss levels, after you get to level 16, there's one last little animation. The ice block encasing the ghost is centered on the screen. The robot and the snow kind of enter from the 2 sides, and then Carol enters, sneaking up step by step behind the robot, and starts hitting the robot with a stick. Beats it until it's crushed down, dented, and starts sparking. He lights the stick with the sparks that are flying off this robot, which scares the snowball, and the snowball rolls away. Kind of a callback to the previous one where he was chasing the snowman with this torch. And then he uses the flame on this stick to melt the ice block and free the ghost. The ghost smiles at Carol, and there's this kind of little happy moment between the 2 of them. So at the end of the game, you've seen this ghost who is a pain in the rear in the gameplay, big time. Mm-hmm. But he turns into this very sympathetic character as you watch these cutscenes, and he's actually freed, and you get this feeling that the 2 of them have become, good friends at the end somehow.
Yeah, that was a cool touch, kind of the end of the story. But then the game continues beyond that too. It's not just like it stops, but
yeah, this isn't a finished go home kind of thing. It then, as in lots of old school games, rotate you back around to the first maze, but now everything's kind of jacked up a little bit in terms of speed and difficulty and stuff like that. And you can play through those 8 stages, the 16 boards over and over and over again until you run out of Carol lives.
And you did that, what, 3 or 4 times, Rick? Rolled it over?
No, I have saved, when you get to that 16th stage and finish it, you get this nice congratulations, you've saved Christmas. And you get this little rank, and that stuff's in the manual. It tells you about the different ranks and stuff. But and then it wraps around. I've done it, and I think I got pretty far into a second round of the game at some point. I did not recently. I might have gotten to stage 13, which would have been boards 25, 26, somewhere in that neighborhood. Before I kind of lost it myself.
Yeah, and anybody who wants to kind of check this out, maybe you don't have the game yet, or you haven't gotten that far in it. You can find lots of videos of it on YouTube. I found a particular one by a guy named Alexandre Liduario. Yeah, it's probably butchered that name really badly. He's got a video of gameplay where he makes it up to level 26 and ends with a score of like 2,295. But you will get to see the gameplay, and you'll get to see some strategies, and you'll see all those animations if you wanna do it. Otherwise, play it yourself, and good luck with that.
Yeah, and I kept track of my levels as I was going through, and I got up to level 19.
Nice.
So I was on stage 2 of my second run through the game.
Yeah, and since we're talking about playing it yourself, there is a website, carolversusghost.com, which is spelled CARACAROLVS ghost.com, where it's the website for the game. It has information about it. I'm sure it has links to how to order it. You can still order this game from Left Turn Only. They still have some stock. And you can also download the ROM image and play it on emulation. And he has packages for Mac and Windows and that I think come bundled with an emulator to just fire it up and play it. So it's a really well done game.
Absolutely.
Definitely worth trying out.
On that note, let's jump right into James' interview, and then we'll come back and kind of talk a little bit more about our impressions of the game.
Intellivision Game Programmer Interview.
All right, so we're here with James Pujals, who goes by DZJ in various forums that you might find him in television forums and discussion panels or whatever. And he is the developer of a game that came out last year around Christmas time called Christmas Carol and... Wait, what's the full title?
It's Christmas Carol versus the Ghost of Christmas Presents.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, it's a really long thing.
Yeah, but boy, it was a very well-received game. I certainly enjoyed it a lot. So we thought we'd get an interview with him, and he was so kind to say yes. So James, tell me a little bit about your history with Intellivision gaming. Are you a collector of Intellivision stuff?
Yes, I had an Intellivision when I was a kid. I always wanted an Atari and never got one. So, but my grandfather, he bought me one when I was, I think, it's 9 years old, and eventually, I guess I grew up and I left it in a girlfriend's house or something like that. And I wrote the story in Atari Age a couple of times and got a big laugh.
Yeah,
but it's pretty true. I just, I lent it to her. She didn't have a game machine. I think everybody had Nintendos back then, and I dusted it off from the closet, gave it to her, and then we broke up and I forgot about it. And then I started, every 10 years or so, you kind of like remember, hey, what happened to that? So then I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago, I started searching on the internet, for things like Commodore 64 and Intellivision and things that I had when I was a kid. One of those nostalgic pans that you get when you're older, I guess. And I found Intellivision in eBay, and I found in a community, and then eventually I found that people are still programming Intellivision, and I was like completely amazed by that. And I think it was Joe Zabicek.
Yeah.
I think it was Space Patrol or Fortress or one of those that I found the page for. And I was so impressed by that, and I couldn't believe that people were still doing this stuff. So I do collect Intellivision stuff, but it's mostly games that I want to play. I'm not a hardcore collector that just gets everything and anything of Intellivision. I have a couple of consoles because I'm afraid that one of them is going to die eventually.
Right.
And I have a bunch of games. I think I have, but a whole bunch of duplicates also.
Sure.
I have the IntelliVoice and ECS, Completing Box, and everything. And I have a couple of Intellivision 2s that I bought from Carl Jr. And they're still brand new in the boxes and everything, so that's pretty cool.
So when you say you had it as a kid, would this been this may risk you revealing your age, but when you had it as a kid, was this back in 1980, 81, 82 when it was in the heyday, or did you discover it later?
Yep, it was back in the heyday. Back in Puerto Rico when it arrived, I was living in Puerto Rico and I was 9 years old, and it was, I think it was 79 or 80. I think it was 80, because that's when it came out, right? And it was this brand new console that just came out, and it was better than the Atari, and my parent and my grandparents were talking about it, and I just wanted an Atari, And they were like, no, it's better graphics. And they started talking about the commercials and stuff, and I'm like, okay, whatever. So that's why. Well, yeah, I guess I'm old.
Yeah, well, that's all right. You're in good company here. So I got my first one in 1981 for Christmas. So. Yeah. You mentioned before about you found out that there's a community out there that's still programming. Had you done assembly programming before this? I mean, what made you decide to create a game of your own?
Well, I am a programmer by trade, so I program in many languages because I've been doing this since I had the Commodore 64 back in '83. But assembly, I had to do assembly for the Commodore 64, but that was when I was a kid and I was just like dabbling on it. But then professionally, I used to do in the 90s like Windows development, and I had to do like just short routines optimizing certain, like for performance boosting and things like that. I had to dabble in assembly, go down to a low level of assembly, but it wasn't anything major, and so I've never made a game or anything like that. It was just something that I wanted to do since I was a little kid, because I read in a magazine about the Blue Sky Rangers, and I was just like, I wanted to be one of them, and I wanted to meet them, and I wanted to make games. I just want to make games, but it never turns out like you want to.
Well, it sounds like you eventually got there.
Well, yeah, but you go to school, then you do programming. At the beginning, it's like programming for fun, and then you get a job, and then it's go to school for programming, and it just becomes, working banking applications and stupid, boring stuff like that,
I do know. I'm a programmer as well for my profession, so I understand.
Cool.
Tell me a little bit. What listeners may not be aware was your original idea for making your first game was to make the definitive port of Pac-Man for the Intellivision. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Oh yeah. The thing is that I loved Pac-Man, and I liked playing it when I was a kid. I never had enough quarters to get good at it, but I loved it. And I will be mesmerized when somebody will play it and just stare at them, and especially when they're good and they start like doing all those the patterns and things like that, which I never could memorize. I was really never good at it, but I really liked the game. And I think I even had a period that where I was like, had Pac-Man fever when I was like 12 years old or something like that. I had stickers and I had bed sheets and everything Pac-Man, Pac-Man gum and stuff like that. But eventually, it's just one of the games that I really that defined, that point in your youth. And later on, I had a MAME emulator, right? And one of the ROMs that I first got was Pac-Man. I started playing that thing again. So I always wanted to make something like Pac-Man. And it wasn't an Intellivision game or anything like that. It's just that throughout the history of, throughout the times, I have read little things about Pac-Man, the way that it was made and its basic history, and how very simple rules were implemented in the game that are really very, very basic, but that they are done with such care that they give the game a really high level of quality and charm, and it makes all the sprites behave like if they have really complex mechanisms of artificial intelligence or anything like that, for the time at least. But they're really, really very basic, simple rules, and I was always fascinated by that. So I always dreamt about, one day I would like to make something like Pac-Man, basic things that you can put little rules together and make something complex out of that.
Yeah, so I assume you're referring to, well, we'll get a link and put it in the show notes, but you're referring to, there's like a Pac-Man dossier website where it breaks down rule by rule how the monsters behave, correct?
Well, yes, that's something that I found later. But before there was, I had read much more simpler treatise on it. Things like that just explain that there's the ghost just one chases one, the other one chases the other, and things like that. So it was really basic things, and it was really fascinating. But eventually, yes, I did find that the Pac-Man dossier, which is a really fantastic resource, on especially anything to do with Pac-Man. And it does break it down, single thing by the modes of the ghosts and everything like that. So by the time I discovered the Intellivision programming community, I took that up as my project. But that really doesn't mean anything, because, if you met my wife, she'll tell you that I have all these huge list of projects that I even write them down and I never do anything about them. So what I did with Pac-Man was I started reading about the Intellivision programming, the documents that Joe provided, and I downloaded the SDK, the software development kit, but I never really was learning anything about it. It was too much complicated and I didn't get it or whatever. So what I was doing is I would start having daydreaming of if I were to make a Pac-Man game, especially for the Intellivision, if I were to make a Pac-Man game, how would I go about doing it? And this is what I call the theory phase, where I just come up with an idea and I just try to break it down into smaller areas and figuring, well, how would I do that? And this is around the time that I discovered the Pac-Man dossier, and I figured, I have to do this one day. So I just start thinking the maze is divided into little blocks, little tiles. How would I do that? How would I store that in memory, and how would I map it so that I know that each tile connects to the next and there's walls and things like that? And figuring and trying to think and coming up with high-level ideas of this. Nothing assembly at this point. I didn't even know assembly. So, and that's what and that's what I have passion for. That's what I like, just dreaming about those things. And my wife called me up on it, and she said, "You're always talking about this. You're always doing, making this list and thinking these things up, but you never follow through with it." And one of those things. And then we brought out the list of the things, that it has write a book, write a video game. And we would travel to Europe and all the things that that you always want to do and you never do and whatever. So and I told her, you know what, I'm going to do this. I really want to do this. And I joined the programmers list and I started trying to learn assembly but by then has been 2 years has gone by, and it has only been 2 years of me just drawing tiles and mazes in my head and on paper also, of and simple algorithms of how I would design the maze in a way that will fit within the screen. And none of this thing had any code at all, but it was just my idea of how I would do it. And among the things that I wanted to do, you mentioned the definitive port of Pac-Man, and it was because I've seen the Pac-Man for Intellivision, and I've seen the Pac-Man for Atari and for other vintage consoles, and they're very, very well done. But they're missing a few traits that, to me, I've always been able to notice them since I was a little kid, and I always thought that they were germane to the Pac-Man experience itself. And one of them is cornering. I mean, when you get closer to when you're really going really fast in a corridor and you're going to turn and you move your joystick just right before the turn, and Pac-Man sort of cuts the corner diagonally, and that allows you to gain some speed. Those things, you don't see it in many ports, and I never understood really why, but I guess it's a thing that's always been missing. The other thing is the ghosts seem to have a really subtle trait where their eyes seem to follow the direction that they're going, but their eyes will point to the direction that they will go as soon as the AI routine makes the decision. And this could be a couple of pixels before arriving to the turn. And as a player, you can use this to know like if you have really good reflexes. I mean, I never did, but if you do have really good reflexes, you can tell where the ghost is going right at the point of before the junction, and then you can just like turn around or something like that. And those little subtle things that I feel like make the game, and there's a few other technical things that I always thought that could be in those games that they never made it. So I figured I want to make a game, a Pac-Man version, and this one's going to have the corner, the fast cornering thing. It's going to have the ghost, and that's another thing. The ghosts have to look like the ghosts in the original arcade. If they don't have those eyes, then they don't have that charm. They're just like the Pac-Man Intellivision port. I think they took the sprites from the 2600 version. They're just like the same. They're just like those like pink blobs or something like that. They don't have that charm with the eyes, of the big eyes. And that's the kind of thing that I wanted to do.
I certainly agree with you about various Pac-Man ports. While it seems to have the basics of the game correct, and the you're moving around a maze, the energizers seem to behave correctly, the monsters move and chase you and such, but it doesn't feel like a genuine Pac-Man experience because the monsters may be. While they may have put, I certainly don't know what went into these Pac-Man ports, but maybe the monsters have some form of different AI, but it didn't feel, I've never come across a Pac-Man port that really felt like the arcade.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I understand what you mean there.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I tell you, once I made my first demo of the Pac-Man just running around the maze and moving the controller and doing the cornering, it just right there. To me, just right there, it felt like Pac-Man, and that was amazing. Just that simple thing, because it's actually turned out to be a simple thing to do, but that simple thing.
Yeah, so I was following your progress on the programming mailing list for Intellivision programming, and I definitely played around with some of your early demos as well. So it was moving forward. Can you tell me what happened for you to decide to leave the Pac-Man port and do something an original game instead?
Yeah, well, what happened was that by the end of 2010, I had already a simple game engine and the sprite graphics and the mechanisms of AI. And the Pac-Man running around the maze and the controller driver and everything like that. And I thought I was like halfway there, little did I knew. But I thought I was halfway there. But it was, I think it was around Christmas time. Yeah, it was definitely around Christmas time that I had something to show, and I started showing it off in the mailing list. And I had vacation coming up for Christmas. I had 3 weeks of vacation, starting the week of Christmas itself, all the way to January. And I thought, hey, it would be cool if I just take the Pac-Man demo that I have so far that doesn't do anything. It doesn't even have the ghosts. It just has Pac-Man running around. If I take that and just like decorate it for Christmas and present it as like a simple Christmas card sort of thing, electronic Christmas card, to the programming community, which as a thank you for all the help that they have given me. And I thought it would be cute. So I came up with a Christmas motif and the whole idea of the elf instead of the Pac-Man, and the whole thing with the ghost. I started thinking of the ghost of Christmas present from the Christmas Carol story from Charles Dickens, and I, playing with puns in my head, I came up with the ghost of Christmas Carol, the ghost of Christmas presents, as a pun, and then also Christmas Carol being instead of a Christmas Carol being the story, it's a Christmas Carol of a girl called Carol that works for Christmas, and it was a silly thing, but post the idea to Joe Sabicek, which has been helping me a lot with a lot of the learning the assembly and programming for the Intellivision, and giving me a lot of help there. And I proposed it to Joe, and Joe said, hey, that's a great idea. Go for it. So I started working on it, and he said that he was going to help me with anything that I could. And by then I didn't have the AI of the ghost or anything like that hooked up. So, or sprite drivers. I had really basic things. So he helped me throughout this couple of weeks, coming up with an actual game, because it turned out to be a pretty complete game. It's a single level, but it was pretty complete, and it followed pretty much just Pac-Man's mechanic, and it even had the difficulty table that I ripped out from the the Pac-Man dossier, where it has that every other level or something like that, it increases the speed by certain percentages and things like that, and it worked in exactly the same way as Pac-Man. But it was throughout that time I also came up with while I was in my downtime, while I was not working on the Christmas Carol game, I started coming up with an actual story, and which is something also that I do. It's part of my whole daydreaming thing of the future book that I will plan to write. Well, now it's a children's book. So I came up with a complete mythos for this whole thing. There's Christmas Carol, which is the high elf that works for Santa Claus, and there's this evil snowman guy that he just came in one day and broke into the warehouse where Santa keeps his presents, preparing for Christmas, and he broke in and he stole them. And then Santa calls on Christmas Carol, and she's this Laura Croft sort of elf chick, and comes in to rescue the day. And that's how I visualize it in my head. This whole adventure elf comes in to rescue, and when she goes into the caverns in the middle of I think it was the Himalayas or something like that I came up with. She goes into the caverns, and she meets the ghost of Christmas presents. And this is a ghost that likes presents so much that every time that he sees a package, he will steal it. And that's all he does. He just steals packages. And he lives in this cavern where all the presents that he has stolen are accumulated, and the snowman hid the Christmas presents there. So Christmas Carol has to retrieve the presents and while avoiding the ghost, because the ghost is going to steal them back. And that was the whole thing. And in the meantime, she's having all these adventures. And I came up with a whole bunch of adventures in my head of all the things that she's done. And she unwraps a present, and it has a jack-in-the-box, and it explodes. And then the snowman, he programmed a toy robot to get the Christmas Carol or stun her or something like that. And it was an entire mythology, an entire story that I came up with. And none of that stuff happens in the game. The game is just like a Pac-Man clone. But all that stuff was in my head, and I always thought, someday I'll write either a children's story or I'll make this into a complete game.
Yeah, so for people who may have never played the game, didn't get a hold of it or whatever, most of those scenes play out in these little clever intermissions. I assume you're taking a page from the way Pac-Man had intermissions, but certain break points. You've got intermissions in the Carol game every 2 boards, and it shows a little vignette, a little scene of some kind, giving you a little bit of this backstory.
Yeah, exactly. That was the intention. Originally, the intention was that just to have cutscenes like in Pac-Man, and I thought, it would be cool to come up with little cute animations of the simple stories, and Carol picking up a present, and Carol just running. And at the beginning, they were like that. They were really simple things. Carol runs from one end to the other of the screen, and then the snowman is after her, then they run the other way, sort of like a cartoon sort of chase, and that's the sort of thing that I visualize, and then I storyboarded them, and with my wife, and she helped me with some simple ideas there, and and that's what it turned out to be eventually, just like little vignettes that give you the story, the actual story that I had in my head.
And let me just say, those are very well done. Again, if you haven't played this game, you should definitely get a copy and play this game. But my 4-year-old loves watching me play this game because he can't wait. He can't wait for the next little intermission. He laughs at them. He gets excited. Oh, he's got the fire this time. And I mean, he really enjoys those. And my both of them actually, but my 7-year-old is more pronounced in his love for the music that you put into it. The Carol of the Bells that plays at the end. They don't want me to turn it off. I got to the end of the thing and I'm about to reset and start over. No, they want to let the music play out.
That's cool. Well, I'm glad they enjoyed it. I put a lot of work into that. But just so everybody understands that. This wasn't a master plan. I mean, these things just grew organically over time, and I had a clear vision of what I wished something I could do, but and it was more like an amorphous thing. I wanted, in a sense, it was kind of like the everything in the kitchen sink that I wanted to put in a game that I always dreamt of. So when I finished that little cute demo for Christmas and everybody liked it so much, Joe asked me if I were to complete it, that he would produce it in a cartridge and add more levels and things like that. So it just became like I ended up trying to cramming everything that I ever wanted to put in a game. This was like my end-all, be-all game of all time. So it had to have intermissions, because Pac-Man had intermissions, and I loved those. It had to have a story, because other games that I like have a story from beginning to end. It had to have an ending, and it had to have a boss level. And all these things I wrote in a list, and I even put it in, I think, in the mailing list and everything, for all the things that I wanted to add, but I had no idea how I was going to do any of this stuff, or if any of that stuff was going to make it. But it wasn't a real master plan at all. It was more like, as I kept on working on stuff, it's like, instead of making the cutscene of just Carol being chased, let's make the whole thing with the exploding robot and stuff like that, So I kept on complicating it.
So let me ask you a little bit about some of the game design decisions you ended up making.
Okay.
You went from a Pac-Man style game where you're eating dots or something around a maze to more sporadic, putting presents around the maze. I think once you have the concept of we're going to be finding presents, I think it probably makes sense not to have just a line of presents all the way around the maze like you would have in a Pac-Man game. But was that something you considered, or how did you come to going from a maze full of items that you must collect to a maze that has items in it that you have to collect?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question. Well, when I came up with the original simple idea of the Pac-Man dressed up as Christmas, I wanted... The main thing of it was always to pick up Christmas presents or pick up toys, pick up something. But it was not the little dots in the. Let me back up a little bit. I finished. I had the demo of Pac-Man, and all it did was Pac-Man going around eating dots. That was there already. And the mechanics for eating the dots, and there was a counter of the number of dots, and every time that you finish eating the dots, if it finished the level, or at least it called an event that didn't have anything afterwards. And the power pellets were there, the energizers, or whatever they're called. They were there. They also had the timers, and when you eat them, it triggers a different state of the game and things like that. All those little things were there. So I needed to use them because that was the whole point. I just dressing this up as Pac-Man, I needed to use those. But I didn't want to just pick up, like you said, just like an entire screen of presents. I wanted to have a handful of presents because this is a quick and dirty thing. And that's why as I came up with that idea, I'm thinking, well, yeah, then what do I do with the dots? And I talked to a friend of mine at work, and we were discussing this. Oh, what can the dots be? Well, they can be about if they're candy. I mean, what the hell? It's just candy. It's an elf. She likes candy. I don't know where that came from, but I think one of us said that. So the dots became candy, and the Energizer became magical snowflakes because they had to be there. Those were the parts that were already done.
So
I was just going to say the presents was something that was always going to be there. It was just a handful of them.
Yeah, but the mazes feel, it's definitely not a Pac-Man feel in the sense of the maze full of dots. It's definitely got more of a sparse feel to it. When you put the candy around, it's not an every square full of candy like a Pac-Man might be. Was there something about the aesthetic of having it be a little more empty or something like that attracted you?
Oh, okay. I got you. I understand what you mean now. It was. I guess it's it was. I guess it goes with what I was trying to represent from the story that I had in my head. In my head, what popped up into the story was that Carol walks into a cave, and is going to pick up presents. So it was never going to be. At that point, it was not going to be Pac-Man. So at that point, it was just like rip out all the walls, and then just put little blocks of whatever. And at the beginning, there weren't even going to be ice cubes. That just was a thing that came out at some point. But my wife suggested little, I think it was Christmas trees or something. But it was going to be just like an open space. And because that's how I saw it in my head. It was just going to be, it wasn't Pac-Man at that point. It was just a cave, an empty cave that had a couple of presents lying around, and then a few obstacles so that you don't just walk into it and get the presents. So it wasn't really, I didn't see it as a maze. The maze mechanic just was there because it was the Pac-Man engine that I was writing. But it wasn't intended to be actually a maze. That's what, if you follow the levels that eventually I designed, they have different patterns and things, but they're not really, they're more open, like you said, the more open space, not so much corridors following a maze.
Yeah, it definitely has a different feel than a maze. I mean, there are some levels that are more maze-ish, I guess, but yeah
I guess.
In general, it does have that open kind of empty feel.
Yeah, and the candy, like I said, it was an afterthought. I didn't intend the candy to be there, but since it was something that was already built into my engine already, they did the counter of the dots. And but I told my friend, if we can't come up with something that fits the story, because that was the whole thing, is the story. If it doesn't fit the cute little Christmas story that I'm making in my head, then I can't add it. So I consider even taking them out until I think it was either him or my wife or somebody came up and said, hey, candy, So at that point, it was kept.
And the candy works well, I think, from a gaming perspective, because if you get all of the candy, it's not. Maybe I'm wrong about this. I don't think it doesn't affect your score a ton because they're only like 1 point apiece.
Yeah.
But you do have that option of getting everything on one guy and getting that perfect score bonus, and that really adds some replayability to the game. If it was just getting the presents, you'd probably figure out a pattern, get all the presents, and move on to the next one and the next one. And I think the game would not have as much replayability as it does with that kind of added little extra challenge. So once you've gotten to the point where you can clear these levels, now can you really clear these levels and earn that bonus on every time?
Yeah, and that's one of those things that just grew organically out of this. Like I said, it wasn't a master plan and I designed it like that. It was like, should we keep the little stupid dots? Okay, we keep them as long as they're candy because they fit the story. Now the elf eats candy. And part of the whole thing, it was that in Pac-Man, when you eat a dot, Pac-Man sort of like skips a couple of frames of animation, so it slows you down as you're running, and that's already was part of the code that I was already writing. So then we came up with the whole idea that Carol eats the candy as she runs, but it slows her down because she's getting fat or whatever, eating candy. And that was the whole thing. It was keeping the story as a children's sort of Christmas story.
Sure. So let me ask you another gameplay kind of thing. So Pac-Man, of course, starts off with 4 monsters that are chasing you, and while they do have different AI, different kind of characteristics, which kind of gives them personalities of sorts in the game, there are 4 things attacking you to kill you. When we look at Carol, we've got really only one enemy that kills. The ghost is an irritant at best, I think, in my play, then that he returns the packages, but only the snowman kills you. How did you decide to reduce down to just that one deadly enemy?
Well, part of it was, I tell you, I wrote that original demo based on the Pac-Man code that I had written for a couple of years now. But I wrote the Christmas Carol demo in like two weeks. So I couldn't do much. I didn't have ghosts by then, and I didn't have any AI. So basically what it was, the original idea is Carol and the Ghost. Notice that there's no snowman anywhere in the title. It's just the Ghost of Christmas Presents. And like you said, it doesn't do anything. But that was the whole thing. The original idea was Carol versus the Ghost. She's going to pick up the presents, and the Ghost is going to get in her way. But that was it. And recall that this wasn't really a game. It was more like a sort of like an interactive Christmas card. So you start it up. And you have little elf, and you run around picking up Christmas presents, and the ghost takes them away, and then you pick them back up, and then you're done, and you finish the game, and haha, Merry Christmas, you know. And that was the whole thing back then. But then I came up with another idea that I had was I thought, I don't have artificial intelligence for the ghost, and at that point there was a predetermined pattern that he just followed. He went from one person to the other, and I wrote like a script that he follows every time. That's all he did, and it was sort of stupid, but I mean, it was cute and everything, but it was sort of lame. It didn't do much. I came up with the idea of having bringing the snowman, sort of like I guess my inspiration at the moment was Joust. That you have the vulture. If you take too long, the vulture just comes in, and the vulture comes in and attacks you and kills you because it's almost unbeatable or something. And it's just a means to like stop you from just wasting time. That's what it is. So that's what the snowman was. The snowman you took too long. There was a timer, and the timer gets reset every time that you pick up a present. But ultimately, if you take too long, the timer triggers, and this enemy will just come into the screen and just go directly to you really fast, and boom, and just kill you, and that's it. You're done. So it was an enticement to move on and finish the level before that. But again, in my head, I had this I picture it not just as a little snowman, cute little snowman. I picture it as one of these evil, I guess like a snowman sculpture, the ones that from the Calvin and Hobbes comic strip. The ones that, I don't know if you've seen those, that Calvin creates as a little kid, and he makes these evil snowmen. They look like monsters out of a monster movie, really cartoony. But and that's how I pictured them in my head. This evil-looking monster with wailing hands and stuff. And I made the animation of him just wobbling around and coming in. And at that point, I liked it, and I thought, the ghost is just a little nuisance that goes around, and this is the antagonist, and the game became that. But I guess I never changed the title, but the game became became Carol versus the Snowman at that point. But that's how these things happen. It was just growing little by little.
So the original title implying that you're against the snowman, but I'm sorry, against the ghost. But then as the little story played out in the vignettes, the ghost comes off as a friendly character. By the time it's done, you're rescuing the ghost in one of the final scenes. And again, it works well. My son, my 4-year-old, really gets it. Like he is excited when the ghost is freed at the end. How do you see after this went through and it kind of started off with the ghost being the antagonist? How do you see the ghost character now that you finished the game?
Well, it's exactly like you just mentioned, and to be honest, the little quick short story that I had in my head, what I could tell you when I was designing the original Christmas card sort of thing. The story that popped into my head was that it was the snowman was just like the introduction to the story. He just stole the presents and hid them. That was it. He's out of the picture. And then Carol needed to go to the caves and just avoid the ghost. But in the meantime, they eventually they befriend each other, and then and Carol helps the ghost, and by then the snowman didn't do anything in my short story in my head, but Carol helps the ghost. I think he gets frozen in ice or something like that. I don't remember right now, and she thaws him out and gets him out and helps him. And then at the end, Carol, and the whole thing in my head, again, I tell you, I got to write this down because this is to me, it's a really cute children's Christmas story. And I intend to write it down. At the very end, Carol just leaves the cave and goes back to the North Pole, but she leaves a present of one of the original presents that the snowman stole. She leaves a present with a little tag for the ghost. And that's the end of the short story. The Carol had the ghost. It was a mysterious being. She found out that the ghost is just a bumbling fool running around liking presents and stealing presents and nothing else. And eventually gets into trouble, and she helps him. And at the end, they're friends. And she just leaves a present as a thank you for whatever. And that was the intention. So you have that. Once you have that story, everything just falls into place. The rest is just figuring out how to do it in code,
Yeah, so that's an interesting transition into one of the questions I had was there any particular bit of the game, something you wanted to do that turned out to be pretty difficult to do given the limits of the Intellivision?
Well, gosh, yeah, there were many things. Let's see. I don't think I ever got to not put anything that I wanted to do because of limitations of the Intellivision. I think it was mostly limitations on time and experience.
When you say time, do you mean how many cycles you have between frame redraws, that kind of thing?
Oh, no. I mean something more basic. I mean, I could continue polishing the game for 5-10 more years, I never end it. Yeah, so it's more like, I gotta get it out. I'm a really slow programmer. I may be a programmer by trade, but I'm really, really slow. And I'm really inexperienced in this whole game design thing. So it wasn't so much limitations of the hardware that I encounter. It was more my own limitations of my experience. Don't get me wrong. There's many limitations on Intellivision, but I didn't even get as far as having enough, I guess, time I guess I didn't get enough time to write even more enemies into the story. So I didn't encounter a limitation of more than 8 objects in the screen at the same time. But that's an interesting one because you know that you can only have 8 movable objects at the same time. The sprites, there's only 8 built into the hardware, so you can only display 8 at a time. And that was something like annoyed me to no end. These introduction sequences that I storyboarded, they were so complex. I mean, in that sense, there was like you have a Christmas Carol, which is composed of the body, which is green, and then the hair, which is yellow, and then you have the snowman, which is also 3 sprites, which is the snowman body and the 2 arms. So now you have 5, and then you have the ghost, which is another sprite, and now you have 6. And then you have, I want to put a little toy robot on the screen. So we have now the toy robot. I think it takes 2 more. So now we've come across the whole 8, and I can't add anything else to the screen. And part of the whole vignettes that I designed originally, they had these little droplets of water that fall from the stalactites, and then there's these little animated things that I put in on top of the characters when they have alarms or something, when they're warning or something like that, a little exclamation point or something. And I struggled because I couldn't get all of these elements at the same time. But then it just goes down to what is it that I really want to do? What's the story got to do? So I pare it down, and I come up with ideas on how to just give a short story with only 2 animated characters at a time in the screen at a given time. And it forces you to sort of, these limitations forces you to think in more creative ways, maybe not code-wise, because I guess I'm not that good, but more coming up with clever ideas to tell a story without that much information at hand. So now you see that if you notice, there's only either Christmas Carol and the ghost, or Carol and the ghost and the bad toy, or Carol and the snowman but nobody else in the intermissions. And that was the main limitation that I had.
And that comes about that 8 sprite limitation is a limitation of the hardware, but the hardware also only allows you to put 1 color on each sprite, correct?
Oh yeah, that's another thing. So if you want to make Christmas Carol 2 colors, then you need 2 sprites, and that's the biggest thing. And I guess I'm very obsessive about my things. So I was very, very obsessive about having just the right look. And I wanted Christmas Carol to have that yellow golden hair, because that's how it was in my head. Mm-hmm. And I wanted the snowman to have the movable arms, twig arms going up and down, because that's how it was in my head. And I wanted the bad toy to have a little spindle in the back, the little wind up spindle thing, because that's how I picture it. And he had to have it, because if it doesn't, to me, it goes back to like the whole ghost of the monsters of Pac-Man without the big eyes. It doesn't have it. It doesn't have the charm, and it doesn't tell the story that I wanted.
So did that drive the decision to that limitation? That drive the decision to take the snowman out of the boss level and make it only a snowball? That's
exactly what it was. Because I the 2 arms. One of them is the snowman. The robot body, and the other one is the little spindle and the lights. The ghost also. The ghost was taken out of the equation. If you notice, the ghost is drawn. It doesn't even have a body, because it has to be drawn in the background, and background background tiles are more chunkier than their sprites, because they have less resolution, and I couldn't see it didn't look right to me. So I just made it, the whole thing with the ice cube and the 2 eyes of the ghost was a cute little clever idea that I just thought, well, I'll just put him in an ice cube. And then that started an entire story in my head. Oh, how he got into the ice cube, the bad toy came in and froze him and all that stuff. And it was like an entire little short story that came in on the side for that. But everything had to fit a story,
It works well. When you see in the animation, when the ice cube, lands on him, but you can still see his eyes blinking inside there. It's very clear what's happening. Again, my 4-year-old tracks well, with understanding what's happening there. So the animations work.
Well, that's the thing that I then changed throughout the development of the game, and I think this happened fairly at the beginning. I changed the focus of intermissions of just being prizes, because that's what it was. That's what it was for me. The goal that you get a new cute animation sequence. in between a couple of levels, so you earn them. But at the beginning, it was just that. It was a prize. But then it became like a way to tell the story that of the things that are happening. So when the boss level came in and I wanted to put the bad toy, but where did it come from? So I had to introduce him. So I used an introduction sequence to do that. One of the cutscenes shows him that he just came from behind the presence or something. And then the ghost needed to be taken out of the equation. So, but if you have it in one level and then the next level he's not there, what is the user supposed to think? So I have to put a little story of what happened to the ghost, and then and the snowman, the same thing. I didn't have arms for the snowman, so the snowman's what's going to be completely out of the boss level, until I realized that after the whole thing came out and I put the ghost in the ice cube, I realized, hey, I got a free sprite, so I can put the snowman back, but he cannot have arms. And then just my obsession with detail started kicking in, and I thought, I can't really put the snowman without arms, because it's just going to look cheesy. It's just going to look obvious that the sprites are being used somewhere else. And this is how I saw it in my head. It cannot possibly be there without the arms. So I have to have something else. So, but if I introduce a new character, then there it goes. Where did it come from? So I can't do that either. So then I came up with the idea of, well, we can melt it into a little snowball, and then there you go. It's a snowball. It has no arms. And then if you see the introduction sequence, the arms just fell down and they were on the floor. And then you can see, and I think it's another introduction sequence that I showed the ghost running back and forth with the twigs as arms or as antlers or something. So I had already established that they fell off,
Right.
So I know, I'm sure people are going to think that I'm crazy or something, because this is an 8-bit game, and none of this stuff is important or relevant to the gameplay or anything. But I don't know. To me, this was my the book that I never got to write, the video game that I never got to make. This is the thing that I wanted to. I don't know. I just wanted to make it with all these details, and they mean something to me, even though they're little silly things. To me, I noticed them. So
so you get the game together, and of course you talked before about you got a lot of help from Joe Zabicek, and I'm sure other people chimed in to help out to get that together. So what happens at that point in terms of getting the game actually published? You published it under Left Turn Only, Joe's publishing arm, I guess. Were there any talks or consideration of using Electronite or Intelligent Vision, or did you just use Joe's because he had been so helpful?
Yes. It was exactly because Joe was so helpful, and we had discussed this in the past. By the way, Electronite didn't exist at the point that this was happening, or maybe it did. I don't know. But William certainly wasn't preparing to do anything of the sort. I think that came later after. I think there was some falling out or something with Carl Jr. and Intelligent Vision, and I think he wanted to start a company to publish Donkey Kong Arcade, or DK Arcade, or I think it was called then. But this started before, so so it was only Joe, and there was Left Turn Only, and then there was Intelligent Vision. But and I had talked to David from Intelligent Vision at the moment, but I didn't know him very well, and it turns out that Intelligent Vision was working with Joe, and Joe was working with Intelligent Vision. His titles were actually, I think David had the contacts for the printers and the graphic artists and the overlays, and Joe had the hardware itself, so they actually work together.
I've gotten that impression as well with some of the back and forth I've seen about, so and so helped with the overlays and so helped with the cart shells and this and that. And I'm like, oh, those guys actually are on not different sides of it. That's not really what I mean, but he's got his own publishing arm. But I think that there's perhaps only so much so much expertise in the community to go around in terms of, this guy knows how to get the boxes done, this guy knows how to get the overlays done.
Yeah, so that was the thing that, exactly that. Somebody, there was this guy that had a die made for the boxes, and he was making the boxes for Intelligent Vision. And when Joe needed to publish his own personal game, he made the hardware for the cartridges, and he made he had his own shells made for the cartridges. But he knew David, and David had the contacts for the boxes, so he got them through that. So that's how we were going at the very beginning. So Intelligent Vision, in a way, he was working with us. But then I think I hired an artist, and we had the artwork done and everything, and laid out, and we were going to the printers because David was going to publish, I don't remember what it was at the moment, Mindhunter or something like that. There was some games that he was going to publish back then. I think it was 2010, and he wanted to run Christmas Carol along with it, but the game wasn't finished. And I think there was a lot of pressure that David needed to get things done at a certain particular time, and my artist was having trouble finishing the layout, or we were late on something, so we decided it all fell through. We lost the window of time that David was doing his printing. So, but it's fine because we didn't have a game at the moment, so we weren't ready to publish anyways. So
yeah, I think a lot of that comes down to, you're dealing with hobbyist kind of numbers on these things. And so no one is ordering 10,000 boxes for these games.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
So to make it economically, you have to kind of get them in reasonable batches.
Yeah, exactly. And then so as you see, it was always going to be with Joe all along. I was ready to publish on my own. I didn't have any idea how I was going to do it, but David and Joe have both offered to help and guide me through the process if I decide to publish myself, which was one of the things that I considered at the very beginning. And I was ready to put all the capital. I mean, I tell you, this was my masterpiece. This was the thing this was my baby. I worked in it for years, and I was so proud. And I said, my wife and I had discussed it. $15,000, I don't care. This is my hobby. I'll put it in. I don't care. This is the thing that I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life, or at the very least right now. And it's worth it. Even if I have to, put in a lot of capital myself, I think it was at a loss. It's worth it. So I was ready to do that. But Joe, he had this idea of, and I don't mean to speak for him, but I believe he had this idea of starting his publishing company. I think he wanted to dedicate mostly on the hardware, but he wanted to try out how it will work publishing games, and he offered to publish my game and take advantage of his experience and his contacts. Because by then he had published a couple of games, including the very first homebrew for Intellivision, the Fortress one, which he published a couple of times. So we agreed to it was a gentleman's agreement. There was nothing on paper or anything like that. It was always like, oh sure, I'll publish with you. So it was a tacit understanding from the very beginning that he was going to be running the show with this. But it was a very, very collaborative effort from many, many people, including William and from Electronite and David from Intelligent Vision.
So do you have any numbers? Like how many carts, manuals, box overlay combinations were produced, and how many got sold, or do you know those?
Well, I may have some information on that, but I'd rather not discuss those things in detail because I think since William was handling the box manufacturing and things like that for Electronite, as a matter of fact, I don't know if he wants to treat the numbers of printing runs and things like that as a proprietary information, so I'm going to respect that. And I don't want to speak for Joe of how many games he actually got polished. We had an understanding. Our agreement was that, and I will tell you that, our agreement was that I will give him a license for 300 copies, and he will, and then after that we were going to discuss how if we needed to renew it or do whatever we need, and he was going to pay me a certain amount as an advance, and as a license fee, and then after that a certain amount for royalties for every copy sold, and up until 300. And I don't know if we have reached 300 so far. I really don't know. I don't think so. But I think at some point in time we went over the 200 mark. And I think that's pretty much around the market that we have in the Intellivision community.
Yeah, sure, and that's fine. I wondered about. I'm always curious about how these you manufacture a cartridge, and there are myriads of details that have to get right. You know, how many boxes can go through the printer in a chunk, how many of the overlays can go through in a chunk, and these batch sizes in order to get reasonable costs for all of these things. And again, if these are details that wouldn't be fair to speak about, that's fine. But I'm always curious as to, is there kind of like a minimum number that if you're going to do a game and you're going to be able to, if you're going to try to price it at, $60, $70-ish, what it seems like the market's willing to bear at this point, is there a minimum number you've pretty much got to sell to be able to get your money back?
Well, there is that number, and but like I said, I don't feel comfortable divulging it because it's something that it's not my information. Keep in mind that I don't have apart from this deal for this game, and Joe and I are good friends, but we don't have a. What do you say? I'm not part of Left Turn Only, and I'm not part of Electronite, and I don't want to speak for them. So I don't know to what extent they want to treat it as proprietary information, but I will tell you that there are minimum amounts that they have to send to the printers, and a lot of this it's sunken costs. Right. Let's say to put a number to it, and I don't quote me on this because I don't know, but let's say that you print out 10,000, or maybe that's too high a number, but let's say that you print out 1,000 and you know that you're going to be selling 200 of it. There comes a certain amount of boxes that you can sell that you break even at that point. It won't be 1,000 because you'll never get there, so you price it accordingly, and which is part of the reason that the prices have gone up over the years, but the quality of the materials has really gone up. So that's part of the cost. Sure.
So yeah, you got this game. You're getting ready to go. You're ready to demo it. It was at CGE 2012.
2012, yes.
And you found a bug at CGE. Is there anything you could tell us about that?
Oh my God. Yeah. That was so embarrassing. That killed me, man. That really, really killed me.
I can only imagine how that would be.
I mean, I tell you, this was my baby. I went there. I arrived there. It was on a Saturday and Sunday over the weekend in Las Vegas. My wife and I went there on Friday, and we met there with Joe and William, and they were still building boxes for the games, and we were helping them. We started gluing the boxes, and those gatefold boxes, those are a pain to build. I mean, you have to get them just right, otherwise it doesn't look right, and they don't close properly, and you have to throw away like 20 until you get it right. But then once we started getting to a flow, and we started building boxes and putting stickers on the cartridges, and we were preparing for all this. But it wasn't only Christmas Carol we were preparing also what's it called, Space Patrol and Fortress, the last versions the last units that Joe had around, and we were also packing D2K for Electronite, and I don't remember if Mindhunter was in there. I know he was selling it at the moment, but I don't know if we were building it as well. But definitely D2K. So we were all working there overnight, and it was a lot of work. By the morning, none of us had slept, and I think I went to the room to take a shower and came back to before the opening to see the show, right? And Joe and William were still at it. it. So it was a really, really stressful thing. So then we spent the entire day showcasing the games and enjoying the thing and drinking coffee to stay awake. But overall, we were all having a really good time and meeting people and talking about the games, including we were showcasing, well, not we, I say we because I was with the group, but it was actually Joe and William Electronite and Left Turn Only in their booth there, showcasing D2K and Christmas Carol, and everything's going swimmingly. And then the show closes, and I'm playing Christmas Carol because I really do like the game, and I'm playing it up, and I'm playing it really. I'm getting into a zone and getting to the boss level. And the game crashes. And I'm like, I panicked. I was like, wait, what? So and by then the show had closed. This was Saturday night. We still had Sunday morning to continue with the show. But the exhibition had already closed, so it was only us staying there hanging out. And I sort of like had this panic look in my face, and Joe looks over to me and says, "What happened?" And I'm like, "The game crashed." And he's like, "Oh, wow, try rebooting. Let's try it again." So I go and reboot and play, I don't know, whatever it takes me to get to the boss level, 10 minutes or something like that. I get to the boss level, and poof, it crashes again. So then he says, well, let's try it without hooking up. I think we had the ECS and the IntelliVoice connected there just because. So we unplugged everything and we tried again just in case it was something to do with the hardware. And it crashed again. And then I played it. I think I did it like 5 or 6 more times, and every single time it crashed on exactly the same point, no matter what I did. And I thought, okay, maybe if I get perfect score, maybe if I don't try to get perfect score, maybe if I had only one life left, maybe if I have 5 life left, and I tried different combinations, and it would always predictably crash no matter what at the same point. And at that point, we knew that we had a critical thing critical fault in the game, and we panicked. We were all panicking. And lack of sleep and everything. We were all like, what are we going to do? We sold a few copies already. So we thought that we were just going to go sleep it off and discuss it in the morning. We knew that we needed to do something about it, but we didn't know what we were going to do. So in the morning, I think it was Joe, we came up with a plan of, so we're going to announce it over the PA, and we're going to make flyers, and we're going to post them around, and we're going to recall everybody who bought the game. We're going to have them sign a little form, like an RMA form, requesting a replacement. And since we didn't have the tools or the development tools or anything to fix it at the moment or to debug it, we had to wait until we got back to do that. And Joe came up with the idea that, and it was all Joe. It's a fantastic thing that he did out of his own pocket. He said that he was just going to take the cartridges. He was going to ask the people to return them if they wanted to, but he knew that they wouldn't. So he was just going to offer them a replacement cartridge. We can save face. We can gain more cred with the community and save our credibility with them, and not inconvenience people hopefully too much by letting them keep the game that they bought without having to send to somewhere strange that they never met before. So that was the plan. We're going to just ask them to give us their information, and as soon as we had a fix, we're going to send it back, and that's what we did. And it turned out to be like the most stupidest bug ever. I mean, it was just the most stupidest thing, and it was something that I didn't test. A last-minute change that I did not test properly.
Wow, I understand that. I've certainly had that bite me. Not in game programming, but in other things where it's like, oh, I thought that was clean, but it wasn't.
I know, but it was completely unintended. I mean, I don't mean that there are any bugs that are intended, but it was a change that had a side effect. It was like without getting too technical here, there was a routine at the end of the level. When it's going to start the boss level, it's going to award you an extra level. An extra life. And that was just part of the whole gameplay. The first time that you go around the whole levels, when you get to the boss level, since there's different mechanics, it's going to award you an extra life, just because, to give you a chance to lose one while you were learning the ropes with the robot. So there's this routine, and at the beginning of the routine, it initializes the music tracker, the music playing engine, and the sound effects engine. But it used to be done at a different point in time. So I decided that it would be cleaner. This is like last minute thing, right before CGE. I thought it would be cleaner to move it to the routine to initialize the level, the what's called the boss level. So I moved it there. But what happened was that and it works, and I tested it in isolation. I tested that level and the transitions from one to the other, and it worked beautifully. What I didn't count on was that the bottom of the routine, instead of returning to its caller, the subroutine that you called and then you return to the caller, instead of returning, it kind of like had an optimization to try to branch directly to the next routine in sequence, rather than having to go back and forth, calling this routine, then coming back and then calling the next one. It kind of like piggybacks and calling one, and it changed them one to the other. And it was just an optimization, a trick that Joe taught me, and it saves time cycles in the CPU. And what happens is that by adding this call to the initialization to clear the sound effects engine at the very beginning, I changed the return address of the routine, and instead of going back to its caller, since it was chained to go to another one, it corrupted the return address. So it goes through the chain, and at the very end of the chain, instead of returning to the original caller and finishing the initialization, it went somewhere else, whatever was in memory at that point, and it just crashed. And I tell you, that's why the change was a simple thing. It was just adding a call at the beginning of the routine to initialize the sound. And it had nothing to do with where the actual error occurred, which is at the end of the call chain.
Well, so, that's the way those things go. I'm sure you're being a programmer, you know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always something innocent. It's always something you should think, this will be cleaner. I'll make this better. And yep, I understand completely.
Yeah.
So, but of course, that ends up not being a terrible thing, because the video game collecting community is a little bit crazy when it comes to this stuff. So now they have a variant that not many are out there, and I'm sure that's seen by some people as very valuable to have that in their collection.
Yeah, the ones that were sold at CGE, those were like the special edition. They have the clear shell that Joe made. It's a beautiful thing, and they kept them. They have the clear shell with a bug in it. So it's a completely ineffective game, but it's a special thing.
I was going to ask, did anybody return it? Did anybody ask for?
I think there was one person that returned it. Only one person, but which is fine. I mean, we don't put any judgment on this. This was the intended thing. We always expected that to happen. So it's not like, oh man, I wish they would have returned it or anything. It is what it is.
Yeah, it's no big deal. Like I say, knowing the collector community, that's just a variant. They're happy about that.
Yeah, Joe. I think it was Joe that pointed that out. I was trying to convince the people at the CGE. When they came back to the booth, and I said, "Hey, I read this flyer about the bug," and I was trying to convince her. Well, I was trying to be very diplomatic and say, well, you can either go home and wait for us to send you a replacement, or you can give us the package that you bought here, and we'll open it up, take the cartridge, fix it, put it back in, reseal it, and you'll have a perfectly good working game. And I'm trying to paint it as positive as I can. And Joe's telling me, dude, it's not going to work. They want to keep the rare one inside the package.
Yep.
So, but that wasn't the only bug.
Oh, I'm sure they've found things. So after the game goes out, and again, once you had the fixed version out there, and it makes I think it's fair to call it make it a splash in the community. It was a well received game. You had a high score contest, and you offered a pretty unique prize. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I knew that I needed to do something for Christmas. I mean, come on, it's a Christmas game. So one day, I was thinking about doing a Christmas high score competition. So I talked to Chris, I think his name is the Chris Parsley, that he from Atari Age, that he runs the Intellivision High Score Club. Where people just like every week or every other week they compete against each other, and it's a really friendly thing. There's no prizes or anything. People just post screenshots of their high score. And I talked to him and I asked him, "Hey, do you want to what do you think of this idea? We run a game contest, a Christmas Carol contest for Christmas throughout Christmas." And you handle it through the board like you normally do, but at the end, whoever has the highest score, we give really cool prizes. And at the moment, what I wanted to give was patches, because I always wanted. I mean, the whole thing now, patches is a thing now, but it was a throwback to the early days of Intellivision when I think it was Imagic that used to do this. They used to give out patches, right?
I can't speak to Imagic, but I know Activision was known
Activision.
for...
I'm sorry. Yes, it's not Imagic. It was Activision. Yeah, that's right. Activision.
And we are talking about sew on your clothes cloth patches, not like a software patch.
Yeah. Throw in your clothes or iron on patches, like the Merry Badges sort of thing. And I always thought that was so cool. And I told my wife, "Hey, I want to make this competition. I want to make a Christmas Carol patch." And then she's like, "How are you going to do that?" I have no idea. But I'm going on the internet, I'm going to search how to make patches. And it turned out to be a really simple thing. There's companies that do this shit. I'm sorry, this thing.
That's all right.
There's companies that do this thing all over the internet. And I got quotes from a whole bunch of them. I had an idea of what I wanted. I discussed it with them. It was a really easy thing. So it's like a sausage factory sort of thing. They already have it streamlined. You talk to somebody, you give them the details, and then poof, here's the art you wanted. Yes, okay. And that's it. And then they send you the patches back, made in Hong Kong or something. So that was the thing. And as I'm designing the patches and doing this thing, I thought, hey, I'm going to give away, I think it was 10 patches that I wanted to give away, the top 10. What if the top guy gives a special version of Christmas Carol, just a one-of-a-kind thing, and just like one change, I don't know, putting their name in the title screen. I was thinking at the moment, a really quick and dirty thing, putting their name on the screen, because all this time, what I'm thinking is, and again, this is the same thing with Christmas Carol. This is the game that I designed for the little 9-year-old me that used to play Intellivisions back in the day. The little kid that liked Intellivision intermission screens and little cute characters and stuff like that. So here I am. I wanted to give away patches because I wanted a patch, and I wanted to give away a little special gift, Christmas present, with a game with my name on it, with the winner's name on it, because I wanted my name on it, So that's what it was, It's these little cute things that I wanted to do for the little 9-year-old me. Had this game existed at the time, it would be awesome if this thing was like this, if there was this competition and this thing. So that's what I designed it for. And Chris Parsley, who was running the High Score Club, he suggested that instead of making it for a week or two, like we usually do in the High Score Club, that we go through the entire month of December. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. So then we started discussing about how we're going to do the rules and things like that, and how to avoid cheating and all that stuff. But as all those ideas started coming into the forefront, I'm thinking, you know what? None of that stuff matters. This is a Christmas game, and I'm making it for little kids. I know it's not little kids, but it's the inner kid of every Intellivision collector, And I'm thinking, who's going to play a Christmas Carol, a Christmas themed game, and it's going to cheat? And you know what? if that person wants to cheat so bad because he wants that patch so bad, have it. Here, have the patch. I don't care. Really, it's really not worth it. Because we talk about what we could do to put rules in place, and everything seems so onerous and so mechanic. And I thought, we agreed that it wasn't worth it, that it's just a fun thing to do. People should participate out of fun and enjoy the whole thing. And it should be just a fun experience. And play with your kids and bring your wife and whatever, and enjoy the Christmas time. But if anybody really, really wants to cheat and be that Scrooge guy, then, let him be that person. And we're not going to catch it, and we're not even going to try. So that was the whole thing. We didn't go around telling everybody this. But we didn't have any way, We had no way of knowing. We're asking people to send screenshots that can be photoshopped easily. But we're not. Obviously, if there's anything that looks really strange, or obvious strange, then we're gonna make it. It's gonna be suspect, and we're gonna point it out. But nothing happened, And if somebody cheated, they did it really well, and so it wasn't really a big deal. Later, I saw that I think it was Rev from Atari Age that has a Internet Revolution site. They make a D2K competition that was similar in spirit, and I saw that they fell into the same trap that I almost fell. They started putting all these rules on how to avoid cheating, and no, you have to send this information this certain way. And I thought, really, if you make it too hard for the people who are having fun to do it, it's not going to be fun anymore. So I'm going to make it as simple as possible for the good guys, and whoever wants to abuse the system, then so be it. But it's not going to tarnish the fun of everybody else. So then eventually, to get to the point, sorry for rambling.
No
but to get to the point, eventually the competition was a complete success. I mean, this was an amazing thing. I think everybody had loads of fun. I certainly did, and I was monitoring this thing daily. And there was a lot of people. I think we had, I don't remember right now how many entries we had, but we had a lot of entries. People from all over the world, not only from Atari Age, but outside of Atari Age. And it was a success. And eventually the guy who won was Chris Dean. He's the Wisp follower. His name in Atari Age, and he won the grand prize. He amazed everybody because out of the blue, there was a contention between, I think it was two people for the longest time, for about 2 weeks. They were going back and forth, and I thought it was going to be one of them. And all of a sudden, during the last few days, along comes Chris, and he just boom blasted with a score that was like beyond anybody saw. Nobody could imagine that score. So luckily, Chris Parsley, that was running the show, I don't know what he does. I think he works in IT or something, something to do with computers. I don't know if it's network engineering, something like that, but something to do with computers. But I don't know what he does, but that guy's like a mathematician or something. That guy came up with a broken down analysis of the points that you can get per level, per life, and the possible permutations of what you needed to do to get so many scores for so much lives and so much level, number of levels that you've reached. And he did the whole breakdown based on the score that this guy had done. And we came up with a conclusion that, yeah, the guy could have cheated, but it seems absolutely plausible that score can exist. And the guy's just really, really, really good. So we went back and forth, and I think it was the judges were ultimately Chris Parsley, Joe Sabichik, and myself. because ultimately it was like a left turn only sort of thing. So that's where Joe was involved. So we went back and forth, and we look at the screenshots, and we calculated the mechanics with Chris Parsley. He did this of if it was even possible to have that particular score. And the trick of this is not just because it's possible to have a high score. It's that every level has a certain amount of items that you can pick up, and it's different in every level. So this guy computed what sort of path you had to reach, or what possible path, or at least some of the most plausible paths that you have to take in order to reach the specific level that he submitted as his last level with the specific score that he submitted. And then Chris went ahead and tried to work through those scenarios and see if he could do it. And Chris is like a fantastic player as well. But he was disqualified from the very beginning because he's running the show with us. So he couldn't, but he had a really fantastic score from the very beginning. So he ran through those scenarios and he actually played them. And he reached the conclusion that it was possible. The screenshot didn't look doctored at all. It didn't look photoshopped. And Chris looked like a nice guy. And we talked to him for a little bit. And so we said, hey, we got a winner. And that was.
And he, it was, I think it was, if I remember right, he rolled the score over, didn't he?
Yeah, because that was one of the goals that was getting at by the end. The top players, there were like 2 or 3. And they were trying to get the score to roll because I have built into the game this little mechanic, and this came from the original demo that I made. The score displayed only 3 digits, and because I didn't have enough space in the screen to display more than 3 digits, so I put it in a variable that only in a single byte that only can hold up to 255 values. So the score could only go to 255. And that's why that was one of the original decisions. That's why the points were so low. That's why you get only 1 point for candy and like 2 points for a snowflake and 5 points for a present, because everything had to be low score. Otherwise, you will crash the game if it reaches the 255 points. So by the time Christmas Carol, I actually made the full-fledged game that stayed in place, because it was just traditional. I added an extra digit, so I redesigned the main maze, and I added an extra digit. But there was still a maximum number of points that you could take, and I think by then I had it in 2 words, so it was a 32-bit number, but it could only display 4 characters. So it was only 4 digits. 9,999 is the maximum that it can show. So I came up with this clever idea. I never expected anybody to see it. Ever. I thought the game was so hard, and I thought that the ending was so fitting that you finish the story and you end the game and you get bored and you stop playing. But I came up with this idea that when you reach the maximum number of points, it rolls up to a different color. So I came up, I worked out the entire list of colors, and the Intellivision has 16 different colors, including background. So there's 15 different changes that I could have. And I made a table of the different colors. And every time that it reaches 9,999, what happens is that the score goes back to 0, and another counter starts ticking. And so now you have 1 plus 9,999, and then 2 plus, and that's the amount of times that you have rolled over. So if you rolled over the score 5 times, then you get 5, and the number of revolutions through the score, and then 9,999. So you take 5 and you multiply by 10,000, and then you add the remainder, and then you have your actual score. But again, this was just like, in a sense, it's sort of like wishful thinking. If somebody ever gets really passionate and about the game and really likes it, like I would do with Pac-Man or something like that, and tries to learn every single little detail about it, I'm dreaming of somebody doing that, but I wasn't expecting anybody to. So that was that table of colors was included in the manual and everything, but it was sort of like an internal joke it wasn't. It actually worked, but it wasn't intended to happen. So when these fantastic scores started coming into by middle of the competition, and we're talking about finishing Christmas 2-3 times in a row, it was like, wow, these people are like amazing at this game. So they started talking about themselves about, hey, let's try to get the points to roll over. And I'm like, nah, that's not going to happen. So they're really pushing it. And but along comes Chris. I think two more people managed to do it. One of them being Chris Parsley, and I think Lee Duario from Actariage. But then when Chris sent in his screenshot, he got it, and everybody was like, "Wow!" Out of nowhere, here we are having this bantering argument back and forth, who's going to get to do it first for about a week, almost every day, and along comes this guy out of nowhere, and poof, he already did it.
It's pretty wild. I assume you've never seen an actual score where it rolled over twice. Is that right?
No, that never happened. This guy, he got to the first caller, but I think he got. Oh, what was it? I think 6,000 points. So it's and by then 6,000 points on top of the 10,000. So it was 16,000. So yeah, he was like midway through the next one, but the game, it's already in the most difficult moment, in the most difficult level, and he just saturates at that point.
Yeah.
Which was that was an idea that Joe came up with. Because I originally had it like Pac-Man. You reach the top and then it starts from zero. But now it reaches the maximum level and then it just stays there.
Yeah, I participated in the high score contest, but I did not get a patch. I'm not at the same level as a lot of these guys, that's for sure.
Yeah, it became so competitive, and honestly, I wasn't expecting people rolled over, not rolled over, but the people started coming in with these amazing scores within the first week of the competition. And we had 3 more weeks to go, and they were already like scaring people from entering the contest already. Because people come in like you. People just come into the competition, yeah, I'm starting. And then you go and you see somebody that has, 6,000 points, and you can get 500.
Right. And I thought I was cheating in quotes. I wasn't cheating in the sense of reporting false scores, but I was playing it. Which the rules, as they said, just play it in an emulator, play it on the hardware. We don't care. But I was playing it in an emulator on my arcade cabinet using a 4-way original Pac-Man joystick. So the controls were about as good as I was going to get, and I still wasn't competitive with these guys. So.
Yeah, and I thought I was really good at the game. I mean, I wrote it and I've been playing it for a year. And I thought I really thought I was the best at the game.
I had been playing it quite a while too. I was helping with the beta testing effort, and certainly knew my way around the screens before the contest started. But man, I just got blown away.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I was blown out of the competition. I wasn't competing, obviously, because I was. But Chris and Joe and I, we submitted our scores, our high scores, and we were in a second part of the high score table, and we were since we weren't qualified, so we were like just honorable mention or something like that. I put it in the high score webpage, but we were there and we were trying to participate, and putting our high score. And I think my score was around 3,000 or something like that, but or 2,800, something like that. And I thought that was like the best. I finished Christmas. I saved Christmas twice, which is winning the game twice in a row. And I got the third rank, which is Ranger Elf. And I thought that was pretty good. I thought that was so good that when I made the patches, think about this, I made the patches with the Ranger Elf rank. Because I thought, who's going to get that? Only the best players. And turn out to everybody reach out the master one, which is the master rank that comes afterwards. And they beat even that. They went beyond it, and they saved Christmas 4, 5, 6 times in a row and getting 6,000 points. And I was blown out. I couldn't play anymore.
So, in terms of Intellivision stuff, do you have any plans to make any other games, or was this just such an exhaustive effort that you're going to move on to other things, other hobbies?
Oh no, definitely. I'm making more games. I found, like I tell my wife, I found what I want to be when I grow up. I want to be a programmer for Intellivision games. Right now, I have 3 games in various phases of design. Nothing really low-level technical design so far. And again, it's that theory phase that I have with Pac-Man for years on, well, this is what I want the game to be, this is what I wanted to do, and this is my vision of the final result. How would I go around solving these technical problems that I've never dealt with before? So I have storyboarded 2 of them. One of them is still like a really conceptual phase. But the first thing that I'm working on right now, I decided that I'm doing right now what I originally intended to do with the Pac-Man, building like a game engine code library thing that I can reuse, that is general purpose and I can reuse for different games. And that's the heart of Pac-Man that could be reused for Christmas Carol. And as it goes, it's not only arcade sort of games, it's the underlying sort of operating system, sort of routines, like a center game loop that displays graphics and does certain things and dispatches events when things happen and reads the controller and things like that, and changes from different states of the game, like from the title screen to the playing game level thing to the game over. So the underlying framework to enable making games, and I'm working on that right now because I figure the development, the incubation period of Intellivision games, it's such a daunting thing. It's such a long time. I mean, Christmas Carol was like, if you consider from the moment that it turned from Pac-Man to Christmas Carol, it was about 1.5 years. But Pac-Man was being worked on for about 2 years on and off. So I know that the next games are going to be a few years. So I figure I'm going to make this base core thing, and I'm going to use it to simplify the game designs, and then apply that to my future games. In the meantime, I'm stopping coming up with ideas, because that's going to be the killer of this thing. You continue, a year has gone by, and you continue thinking of, oh, I could do this game, oh, I could do this game, oh, I could do this other thing. But no, I'll never get anything done if I continue that way. So I have these 3 games that I'm planning, and one of them is, I will tell you right now, one of them is a sequel to Christmas Carol.
I was going to ask if that was going to be something you wanted to mention in terms of what it might be, because I've certainly seen in the Atari Age forums several people have announced interest in what a sequel might look like a Mr. Carol as a kind of the flip of Ms. Pac-Man or something. Yeah, and that's definitely coming. I mean, I already have the full-fledged concept of it, and a new story for it, obviously, because the story, to me, that's what drives the game. I mean, these are 8-bit games, and there's a lot of maybe arcade action things like that, twitching reflexes, but to me, what gives it depth is to those 8-bit graphics is having a story. It's that little blurb that you read in the manual that tells you you're lost in space and now you have to do this, and in your mind you're 9 years old and you say, wow, I want to do that, and then you see this little blip in the screen. So that story, that's what drives the whole thing, So I already got the story and I got the gameplay. It's going to be all new. It's not a rehash of Christmas Carol. It's not going to be picking up toys instead of presents, but or maybe there's going to be some of that, but I don't know. But it's not going to be the same game mechanics. It's going to be a more free movement sort of thing, and it's going to reuse a lot of the things that I have for Christmas Carol, and but it's going to be all new animations and all new characters,
and all new gameplay and all new levels. And I'm thinking that it's going to be a really cool thing. And it's going to be another action title, arcade sort of thing.
Well, we certainly wish you luck on it. You've got your name out there as someone who's put out a very high quality game. I'm certain that when you bring out another one, you'll definitely get a lot of interest.
Yeah, it's going to be a while though.
Well, that's the way these things go, right? All of this is a hobby, I think, for all of us involved.
Yeah, I think I painted myself into a wall for one of them. One of them it's scheduled for 2015, and when I was making Christmas Carol, this is 2012. 2013 is 3 years away. 2015 is 3 years away, and I'm thinking, plenty of time for my next game.
Yeah.
and I put a little Easter egg in Christmas Carol. So I'm not going to say anything about it, but there's a little mention of something in Christmas Carol in the code, and it's only on the cartridge version, not on the ROM version, but on the cartridge version. And my intention was that, hey, once we get close to the date and I'm ready to announce it, I can say, hey, look at this little Easter egg that's inside Christmas Carol, and announce it to everybody. But I don't know if I'm going to make it, but I'm going to really aim to have that game ready for then.
Well, at the very least, if it hits to 2016 or 17, you can always say, hey, here's the Easter egg. You can see how optimistic I was.
Yeah, true. Yeah, it's going to be a few years for my next game, but and I'm not going to make any promises. I mean, anything can happen, but I really, really plan on working on these things, and I've already been working on it, and it's going to be awesome.
All right. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us.
It was my pleasure. I really appreciate for you giving me the chance to talk about my game, and good luck with the podcast.
So that was the interview with James Pujals, DZJ, goes by that in the forums, obviously. Thanks for doing that. Thanks for talking to us, James. Yeah, a lot of really good information in there. He really talked about all the backstory and how the game was developed, and kind of being surprised by people's ability to do well at the game. I certainly can't touch those scores that were in the original competition. I'm not even going to mention my score. I might mention it next episode, but I haven't had a chance to play it enough lately to try to get that score higher. But yeah, what about you guys?
Yeah, I got a chance to sit down in the early morning and get a chance to play. And I gotta say, the game is really impressive. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just enjoyed the sounds that they put into it, and the gameplay in general. There were some times where I'd get into a level and just trying to figure out what the quickest way through the level to get the presents, like get as many of them as I could before the snowman would eventually come out, and see if I could get him into an area where I don't have to worry about him coming after me.
Yeah, there are definite strategies you need to develop in this game. You can sort of lure the snowman to follow you, and if you do it in the right part of the maze, you can kind of get away from him and he won't be able to continue to follow you, and you sort of leave him on the other side of the screen for a few seconds. A lot of the screens, the presents are right next to the snowflakes, but you don't necessarily want to grab those right away. You kind of want to keep them in reserve, but you don't want to pass them up for the points. So if you you guys gotten pretty good at that? Is it level by level? Some levels you figured out, some you haven't so far?
Yeah, level 3 was the one that was giving me the most problems. I eventually started going to the upper right-hand corner from the start, just going back through the corridor and out the other side, up into the upper right, and then just going in a clockwise fashion through the maze.
Do you mean the third stage, screens 5 and 6, Candy Cup? Yeah.
Do you find that it's better to do a clockwise, counterclockwise? Because I haven't really determined that yet, or if that's totally dependent on the screen.
With that particular one, he seems to come out on the right-hand side. So if I'm already grabbing those presents and heading over to the left, then I'm not worrying about getting up into those sections and having him block me in.
Mm-hmm.
It is definitely maze by maze different. You know, like William was saying, if you know the snowman's coming out on the right-hand side, you do best, if you can, to get the presents. Well, this is one of the strategies I played. Run across to the right, clear out as many presents on the right as you can, so that you're heading back to the left when the snowman pops out, and you're not running around the snowman trying to get all the presents where he is now. Right, you're heading back to the other side where you've left some to pick up at the end. And then there's other things where the particular maze can help you. The mazes 3 and 4, stage 2, Frosted Maze, has sort of like horizontal alleyways of sorts in the way that it's structured, and that one can you can usually kind of manipulate the snowman into staying within a particular corridor while you're in another one, and he can't come and get you without running all the way to the end and coming around the corner. And we mentioned before about the technique of hit a snowflake, which causes him to reverse directions. You can actually, if you play it right, he may be, towards the end of a corridor, you catch a snowflake, and now he has to go back along the whole length of that corridor again because he doesn't really have any other places to turn. So there's stuff like that you can do to kind of manipulate the snowman a little bit.
Yeah, and when I've watched other people's videos of, playing, in particular the one I mentioned earlier before the interview, it does seem like there are definite patterns in this game. If you can work out the pattern and the order to do things, I think that'll work for you each time you play that screen.
I remember James posting to one of either the programming list I'm on or to Atari Age or somewhere, just saying that every screen there's a significant strategy you can apply to it. That if you don't make mistakes in terms of balking and stopping at certain places or getting around the corner, whatever, you can just attack them and get through them. That he had figured out, or maybe part of the design, I don't know, strategies for each of those games, each of those levels. The one that really burned me, dare I say, was stage 6, called Freezer Burn. I had a really hard time beating that when I first started playing this game. So stage 6, you're talking boards 11 and 12. And man, just the way that thing is set up, it's got these two main areas that are kind of walled off from each other with a kind of a, not quite a curving, but kind of a curving wall area. So they kind of act like a yin-yang structure, so that you have to run around the outside of one and then enter and go around the inside of the other side. It's hard to describe audibly, but basically it can be really challenging because if you get yourself trapped inside one of those areas with a snowman, you're dead. So you have to kind of manipulate the snowman to get him to run around the corner so he's in the opposite leg of the yin-yang that you're in, to pass it. And so again, until you figure that out, I mean, I remember when I was challenging him. I think this board's too hard. I can't pass it. When I was first playing it, and I guess I should. Now's a good time to mention. I was one of the beta testers for this game throughout most of 2011 and 2012. So I saw lots and lots of variations of this, and so he invited lots of, what do you think about the gameplay? Is it too hard, too easy? Is this board too, not enough, whatever, placement of the snowflakes, just anything that feedback he was taking it, and I remember complaining about Freezer Burn. I'm like, I don't know how to pass this stupid level. But eventually I did, of course. But he kind of held to his guns and said, no, there's a way to pass it. Don't you? We don't have to make it easier.
Touching on that, we should also mention. I don't recall if we brought this up yet. The practice. The ability to practice different levels. you can start the game when you fire up the game. You hit the right button on the overlay there, and you can do a practice, and you can choose a level that you want to practice on. Not the final boss levels, I believe.
Right.
But yeah, you can try out the other screens and kind of get a feel for how, what you might want to do, what they look like.
How to attack it, right?
And then try them out on the different ranks as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just really feature rich. It really has a lot of stuff in it.
Yeah, definitely. It's not a game that you just figure out in, couple plays and like, oh, okay, that's fine. I understand. I'm done.
So I guess we could talk just a little bit about the stuff that comes with the package. Right? I mean, we like to highlight artwork and stuff like that. And, so it's again from Left Turn Only, and it is a gatefold box, which I don't know if this is the first Left Turn Only release with a gatefold. But it was cool to see see the gatefolds coming back into these homebrews, because a lot of the homebrews are, I don't know what you'll call them, the 1983 box style, where you just kind of open at the top. Because it's a much simpler box, obviously, to print, fold, make, all that. It's much simpler than the gatefold.
Right.
But the different people that are doing this, both Electronite and Left Turn Only, have gotten it down to make a gatefold. So it's a nice gatefold presentation. It's got the new Left Turn Only shell. So I don't know if we've mentioned this too much before, but it's pretty common in homebrew development to create new ROMs, put them on ROM chips, and then put those boards inside of recycled old common cart shells, and then put a new sticker on it. And that was how this was done for years. But then recently, last 2 or 3 years, I guess, Left Turn Only has been able to come up with a new cartridge shell that they're manufacturing themselves. It has a label that folds over the edge, and it gives you a picture on the top of the cart as well. So it uses the new Left Turn Only shell. Really cool, and a nice color manual. Right here, let's see, 16 pages? No, 19 pages. 20 pages? I can't read. 14 pages. Forget that.
Or count.
I can't count, read, whatever. But it goes. It's again. It's just I'm always blown away when I pick these things up. I mean, it's as good or better than anything that was coming out in 1981, 82, 83.
And it's on that heavy stock paper. I don't know, Levine, and it's got that new manual smell.
It's really great. Yeah. Yeah, and so he just goes through, gives some of the backstory, has a little tips area, just everything you would expect from
fully illustrated, with little pointers, and this is what this is, and this is what this, and it really reminds kind of the early middle section of the manual. It gives you the different elements on the screen. Here's what this is Carol. Here's the ghost. Here's this, and it really reminds me of stuff you saw in the Nintendo era. When you get manuals and they would describe all the different, showing you a picture of the graphics on the screen. This is what this is. Yep.
It's really cool.
Yeah, I would say without a doubt, this is like above and beyond even the stuff that was coming out back then from Mattel, and Magic gave them a run for the money, but just full color, really really nice presentation.
Yeah, it comes with overlays, but this kind of game, the overlays aren't necessary, but they're real nicely done as well. Very colorful. You really only are moving the disc around. You don't have any action buttons on the sides, and it's just starter practice.
And I tucked them right into the box for safekeeping.
Yeah, you betcha.
So when I picked this up, I got it pretty much right after it was released at Classic Gaming Expo in Vegas in 2012, and I met James there, and we chatted for quite a bit. They had 2 versions available at that show, the standard version, and then they had the collector's edition, which is, I believe that's how they were referring to it. And I opted for the collector's edition, and it's number 6, 006 in the series. And the cartridge shell is that Left Turn Only shell, or some people say the LTO shell. But in the collector's version, it's clear. So you can see the board underneath, which is kind of mostly white with black, and you can see the Left Turn Only logo on the board itself. And in the case of mine, there's just an end label, and they give you the sticker that you can apply if you want, or you can just leave it clear. Now, what happened at Classic Gaming Expo, you heard James talk about this in the interview. I bought it on Classic Gaming Expo is a Saturday and Sunday thing. I bought it on Saturday, and next day come down there Sunday, and there's little signs posted on their booth and elsewhere that come and see us if you bought Christmas Carol yesterday, and we found a bug. So evidently it was a bug that prevented you from getting into the boss levels. I think that's what it was, or completing that level.
That sounds what I heard too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know James talked about that. So yeah, they stood behind it and they said, hey, give us this, give it back to us. And in your case, you bought the collector's edition, and it's still, it's shrink wrapped and everything. And what we'll do is we'll figure out what this bug is. We'll fix it. We'll mail it back to you. We'll re-shrink wrap it. You'll still have the same serial numbered version. And we're very sorry. They just got right on top of this whole thing. And I think, like James said, it was Joe that kind of got behind the idea of what to do. So I don't remember exactly how long it was, a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks or something like that. They sent me my replacement, which was the same box, the same one that I had. It had been, shrink wrapped again. And in addition to that, they sent me an entire separate clear cartridge of the game. So if I didn't want to open the box, I didn't have to. I had the game right there. And they sent me some additional stickers and a couple of the little things like that, little card. Very nice, very classy move on their part for finding that bug and fixing it. Of course, I guess I could have held on to that and then have a sealed variant of the bug version.
Ooh.
But, yay! But yeah, so I don't know how long they made this collector's edition available. It may have just been at the show, but I'm assuming Rick and Will that you guys didn't get that version of it.
That's correct, yeah.
I got the one that's on the site right now.
Mm-hmm. And the shell is the LTO shell resembles the Activision shells for Intellivision, although it's not. It's more just like flat on the top, and well, it's got a recess area for the label, but it's not quite the same. But it's similar to that. It definitely looks different than a standard Mattel Electronics Intellivision cartridge. But your versions it's what color is the cartridge? Is it black?
Yeah, black plastic.
Yeah, they're black.
Okay, cool.
I think it would have been neat to see it in kind of like a very light blue or a white, considering the theme.
Yeah. Well, mine it's clear, but it's a little bit opaque, so it's not crystal clear. So and you can see the white cartridge, the white board inside, like I said. So it does kind of look like snow and glistening. But I'll get a picture of mine and put it up on the show notes on the website.
Cool.
So I want to talk about a couple more things about the gameplay. I do think it's an interesting dynamic that there's only one enemy that's deadly to you. I like that as I don't know, it's just different, right? But and the other dynamic about it is you never get to fully turn the tables on the enemy. You never kill the snowman. Unlike Pac-Man where you eat the ghosts and then they regenerate. So it's just I don't know. It's kind of the same, but kind of different in some of these motifs of gameplay. And one thing that I still, and I mentioned this to James when I was on the beta testing list, I still find one element of it slightly imbalanced, and that is if you can easily, if you're not careful, you can easily find yourself at a reasonably high level, and you're playing the level, you're using your snowflakes to keep the snowman off your back. You get all the presents except one, and then you hit the ghost. And so now you're on this really high level. You're starting over, and you've got no snowflakes left, and the snowman is in the maze already after you. Mm-hmm. And when this happens to me, that's my last level. Because I'm going to get killed. Then I'm going to start the level again. All those presents are still there to be picked up, and I've got no no more snowflakes, right?
Right.
And then the snowman comes and gets me, and I just you don't have enough time to clear the board before the snowman appears. And when I've gotten to a high level and ended the game, it's always been that that gets me. That something happens, the ghost gets me, all the presents get returned to their original locations, and then I'm screwed. And so I mentioned this to this I call it a kind of an imbalance in the gameplay to James, and I think that there's a feature that was put in there that I think I can claim some credit for the idea, or at least given the issue. He has what he calls the pity flake, which is that if that happens, if you're in a scenario where you're on a board and you're coming back to the board again, and there are no snowflakes, one will magically reappear, so that you have something to be able to avoid the snowman with. Even with the pity flake, I don't. I still find it off balance in that one scenario. And it can be really frustrating when you find yourself getting killed again and again and again on the board. I mean, you're up to this really high level. You got like 5 carols. You're rocking this game, and then bang, I lose them all.
Well, now the snowflakes are worth 3 points. So does that imply that you should develop a strategy where you, just in case you run into trouble, that you leave a few of them on the board, or?
Yeah. So I definitely think you want to consume snowflakes and packages kind of together. But you could even make an argument for leaving as many as possible, because again, if that ghost hits you, which he does, then bang, you're starting over, and whatever snowflakes are left is what you're getting. It could be really tough. And by the way, just as a side note, this brings up another issue of depth of gameplay. You can actually attack this game in at least 2 ways. One is just boards, right? How many boards can I pass? Go present, just keep passing boards. What was funny was on the beta testing list, I remember James being, kind of laughing when people were posting, I tried this, tried that, I got this far, and he's like, wow, I've never gotten that far myself, because he always viewed the game as a completionist. He wanted to get the perfect on every board he played, so he was always going for all the candies before he got, and all the snowflakes and all the presents. He didn't even consider the gameplay mechanic of just advancing as far as you could, right? And it's just an interesting. You can if you're more of a completist in your mentality, there's a strategy for that you can apply, or you can just run and gun and try to get through the boards as fast as you can.
Does your completist mentality of collecting Intellivision games carry over into playing this game?
No, not for me. I get the presents and move on. Maybe we should mention a little bit about the control. I know that he worked really hard with Joe Zabicek's help, and I'm assuming others, on the Intellivision programming list, different people chime in from here and there, and he really worked hard to make the disc controller work well for a 4-directional game. Four-way game, so much so that I think they were keeping certain state, like if it's going from east northeast to northeast to northeast, and it's swinging through those, then it does things versus whether it went to east northeast and then back to east again. It kind of took these things into consideration to whether or not Carol should change directions or not. Like it's a really. Yeah, and really doing a good number on that.
Yeah, James did talk about that a little bit in the interview too.
Okay, it's been a while, yeah.
Yeah, so that's true, because I don't know if we mentioned this, but your character Carol is always moving unless she comes up into a wall or an area that she stops. But so it like definitely and if you compare it to something like Lock and Chase on the Intellivision, it controls much better than that.
Yeah, the controls are really fluid in this game.
Yeah. Now, that said, I personally am not good at 4-way games with the disc. And
Here we go.
So when I play this game, I typically play it in emulation on my arcade cabinet with a true 4-way joystick. And let me tell you, this game was a dream in that configuration. I mean, it's so responsive. It's just amazing. It feels like an arcade game in terms of the way it responds to the controls.
I'm gonna have to try that on my. I don't have my main cabinet set up to play emulate Intellivision, but I'm gonna have to give that a try. It sounds like an interesting idea.
Yeah. Just as a side note, I've played a good bit of Burger Time on the Intellivision on my arcade game, and it's not as smooth as Carol. Like there's little tiny glitches where I'm heading up a ladder, and I think I'm, even with the 4-way joystick, I think I'm doing something, and the character stops or something, and it's like, oh crap, I can, just again, none of those issues with the Carol game.
Yeah, well done, control wise, graphic wise, gameplay wise, story wise.
Yeah, it's an awesome game. It's just a really, and I love that it's, again, it seems like we can't get away from this topic, but the idea of intellectual property, it's a very unique game, right? This is not an arcade port that anybody has to worry about. Not only is it a unique game in terms of sprites and whatever, but it's very unique in gameplay. This idea of a ghost that doesn't kill you, but the snowman does, and it's just great.
Right, you can see its origins in Pac-Man, and you can hear that's how he started developing it in the beginning.
Right.
I mean, the ghost, that could be a Pac-Man character. The fact that you're in a maze, well, kind of, but it's not the same kind of maze. And the dots are sort of superfluous. You don't have to eat them, the candy, But you can see kind of its origins, but it's definitely an original, unique game.
So we mentioned it earlier, but maybe I want to put in a plug here at the end too. So the contest, there's a contest going on. And you can, he's added achievements. There's various prizes to win. So, definitely between now and the end of the month, get a hold of the ROM, buy the game from Left Turn Only, get it on your system, and give this game some exercise. It's really good.
Yeah, and if you don't have enough time to get good at it, you can blame me for taking too long to get this episode out.
So I guess just kind of other things to talk about a little bit. We mentioned the box art, we mentioned the overlays. In terms of its rarity, this game is it's kind of hard to talk about its rarity. You can buy one now if you're willing to buy one from Left Turn Only. You can download the ROM for free. So because of that, I don't think it's fetching crazy prices on eBay or Game Gavel. I don't think it comes up a lot because you can still buy it new.
And I took a look just before recording. There are no copies on eBay.
Yeah, and that makes sense. You can buy it new. I can't, nobody's going to be able to keep a copy for the last year and then try to double their money on it or anything like that. So,
what's the current price on the Left Turn Only site for the cartridge in box?
$60.
Okay.
So let's talk about how people rate it. We like to mention a couple of standard websites that do video game ratings. In particular, INTV Funhouse has not rated it yet at the time I wrote the notes down. Video Game Critic gives it an A+. He said a lot of nice things about the game, and I couldn't agree more to that with that rating. And I wanted to we're kind of introducing a new, I didn't even know about this, again, retrovideogamer.co.uk has some video game forums there, which we were introduced to. I think we might have mentioned them in a previous
we started out on episode 1. We got on the forums there. I wasn't aware of the forums prior to that, but it was actually James Pujals who referred me to that website.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah. So Trek MD, one of the users over there, has done a whole bunch of video game Intellivision, as well as other game systems, but done a lot of video game ratings, rated the games. Wait, I'm not getting this out well. Anyway, good. A lot of ratings there for you to look at, and he gave it a 9 out of 10. So it's well received, and I think rightly so.
Yeah, it's a great game.
Go out and buy it, everybody. Yeah, I mean, if you're an Intellivision collector, you owe it to yourself to get this, not only for all the great gameplay and graphics, but just the box and everything. I mean, it's available now, but it doesn't mean it's going to be available forever. So I highly recommend adding this to your collection.
Hello, you're watching the Intellivision show.
These podcasts are getting long, don't you think?
Hey everyone, this is William Olds, also known as Burger Time in the gaming community, here to give you my history of the Intellivision. Now, one thing about me is that I'm the youngest of the three hosts here, so my parents got the Intellivision in around 1983 when I was about 4 years old. At the time, I wasn't even aware that there had been a video game crash, so I didn't know just how cheap they were able to get the system for. The only game I really remember having back when I was about 4 was Burger Time, which is why it's still my favorite game of all time. But even back then, I think I got to about level 8. And for back then, I think that's pretty good, considering I pretty much learned just by playing. I never read any manuals or anything to learn how to play these games. It was not only my first gaming system, but also the only system I really knew about. The other members of the family had the system, and I didn't know until later on that the Atari had even existed. So for me, the Intellivision is retro gaming, where Atari's kind of second to that. It was probably during the course of that year or the year after that we acquired maybe about 20 Intellivision games. And a few of the favorites with the family would be B-17 Bomber, Snafu, and Triple Action. I know my parents got into Treasure of Tarman, and that ended up being my second favorite after Burger Time. Because of family members also having the system, I was able to go over to my uncle's house and play other games that we didn't have at our house. I believe it was there that I was able to play games like Demon Attack and Happy Trails. Now, one game that both my uncle and my parents had was Kool-Aid Man, and I have a bit of a running joke with that game that the kids screaming was the scariest sound of that retro era. I would look through the pamphlets that came packaged with the games and wonder when these games would be coming out. But since I didn't realize that the crash had happened, I didn't realize that the games had already come out, had been in stores, and were probably in bargain bins at the time, if they were still in stores at all. It wouldn't be around 86 or 87 when I would actually have an idea that there were games still coming out for the system, and I would get Thunder Castle and Diner during those years. And to have a sequel to Burger Time like Diner, that was just fantastic for me. What really made me smile was that it was exclusive to the Intellivision. It was also around this time that my parents bought me the Super Pro system version of the Intellivision, and that's the version that I'm using now to this day to play the games. We would still have the Intellivision hooked up even when the NES came out, and I would switch back and forth between renting Nintendo games and playing the Intellivision. And I think by the 90s we had about 30 or so games for the system. believe it was around the time that we got the PlayStation 1 that my parents decided that we would have to pack up the Intellivision and give it to my granddad. Now, we'd still be able to play the system when we went over to his place, so that was at least a good thing. It was about 10 years between giving up the system and eventually getting it back that I would learn more about the system on the Intellivision Lives website. It was there that I would learn exactly how many games had come out for it, and just how many I hadn't played. So when I received that box with the systems and all of the games I had prior, I carefully cleaned up the system and decided from there on I would start to collect as many of the games as I could for it. I believe right now I'm up to 64 games, with about 50 of them complete in the box. A few of the games I still need to find the boxes for, like Diner, for instance. I know that's going to be a pain to try and get with its box, at least for a good price. I also want to try and get all of the Sears variant covers as well. And so a few years ago, with the collecting on its way, and listening to a lot of podcasts, I thought, there isn't an Intellivision podcast out there anywhere. So I decided I would look into seeing how I would go about doing a podcast. And unfortunately, I never really got around to doing that myself. So when Paul put the word out that he was looking for people interested in doing a podcast, I jumped at the opportunity. So I called him up, we chatted for a bit, and pretty much thought of what we would do for the show. He brought Rick into the mix, and you guys have heard so far 3 full episodes, and we're on our 4th right now. And for me personally, I'm really enjoying putting these episodes out for you guys. And with that, that's pretty much the short and sweet of my history. See you all next month.
Okay, so for our next episode, we're going to take a look at the game Bomb Squad, Intellivoice, our first Intellivoice game on the podcast. Bomb Squad, exactly. That's a game from 1982. I had this as a kid, so I'm looking forward to playing it again and talking about it.
You guys all thought we were going to pick B-17 Bomber, didn't you? Well, we will eventually.
Yes, I'm sure we'll get back to it. That's also 1982, so maybe a few more picks in between before we get back to this set. But
yeah, we still have to do math fun and word fun.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, everybody, if you have any opinions or memories or a great hatred toward Bomb Squad, please let us know. hello@intellivisionaries.com or hello@ntpodcast.com, at ntpodcast on Twitter, and of course Facebook, Intellivisionaries Podcast, or just NT Podcast. Let us know. We want to hear some stories. We want to talk about other people's opinions of the games. It's great that we get stuff from you guys after the episodes about the games, but it'd be kind of cool to include your thoughts on the game in the actual episode we talk about the game. So feel free.
And I just mentioned, like always, I mean, if you've got Carol and a Christmas Carol and you've got yourself a good score, we'd love to see a screenshot of that on the Facebook page there.
Yeah, humble us, please.
Yeah, I was just capping it with, always interested, but
yeah. So, as usual, you can find us in the forums on Atari Age. You can find us the forums on Game Gavel. We have our own section there. Intellivisionaries Podcast. Retro Video Gamer Forums, the UK one. Also, we are, as you know, on the Throwback Network. There are several new podcasts on that now. It's the network full of like-minded retro-themed podcasts, many of them gaming-related, a lot of them retro computer-related. Some new ones they've added now are Floppy Days, kind of talking about the old computers back when we all used floppies. And the Retro Computing Roundtable, kind of along the same lines. Then there's Vintage Volts, and other ones, of course, 2600 Game by Game podcast is on there, OTR Playlist, Throwback Reviews, always fun to listen to that one. They did a nice little Thanksgiving show a while ago, and kind of reminisced and talked about other podcasts and being thankful, and we're certainly thankful to be a part of the Throwback Network. And of course, You Don't Know Flack and Sprite Castle. You want to hear some stuff about a all sorts of retro topics. Rob has plenty to say, and you want to watch some gaming videos of Commodore 64 stuff, that's what you'll find on Sprite Castle. And last but certainly not least, No Quarter has joined the Throwback Network, and they are an arcade show where they pick a game, kind of like we do, an arcade game, and play it, compare their scores, and go into detail on the game, the history, production, that kind of thing. And that is a podcast that I've been listening to a lot lately. Rick turned me onto that. He's been listening to it for far longer than I have, but really enjoying that one. So check it out, throwbacknetwork.net. So thank you for listening to episode 4. And yes, I know we actually have 5 episodes available for streaming.
Yes.
But the one with the
to get on you
music,
about that.
yeah, Rick, I know you didn't like that too much. I threw a curveball there.
Now there's more episodes. There's the episode 4 is the 5th episode. What am I supposed to do? I can't make heads or tails of this thing.
Yeah, we were aware of your math inabilities. But anyway, yeah, that was a special episode with some music that people requested. So it's the theme tune. It's the, the intro track and the outro track. By the way, I did want to mention that we are also now on Stitcher. So if any of you are fans of that versus iTunes or any of the other podcast hosting, whatever you want to call it, you can find us over there too, the same episodes. Ironically, our first episode that showed up on Stitcher is the aforementioned music episode. So that's a little confusing for new listeners, I suppose, but stick with us. You'll enjoy the show. We hope that you'll join us next month in the new year, and we wish you all a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Festivus, whatever you're celebrating the holiday season. We hope you have a good one.
Yes, happy holidays, everyone.
You bet.
You've been listening to the Intellivisionaries podcast. Intellivision is a trademark of Intellivision Productions. This is Intellivision.
You have just seen a demonstration of Intel electronics in television. In the next several years, you will see its hardware components and software library grow in number and dimension to provide even higher levels of service to the consumer.
Hang on a second, Rick. You cut out again.
Did I?
Yeah. Do you want to drop the call and come and call back right away?
Sure, I'll do that.
See if that works. Don't answer it, Will. We'll do our own show.
Ooh.
We'll finally get to talk. We banished you, Rick.
Okay.
So in summation, Will and I think this is the best game ever. Thanks for listening. We'll tune in next month. No?
The greatest thing ever. And you guys really accelerated that.
Well, you've been gone for a while, Rick. Must have dozed off there. 3 in the morning.
Gotta check this beer again.
Yeah. What'd you put in there?
I'm sorry. Does somebody want to take one of these, or am I just reading? I don't mind doing it. I just don't want to be the guy who's like took over the whole podcast.
It's too late for that.
That is what happens most months, and I'm trying not to be that guy. Anybody else want to talk about the box art?
Yeah, because it's funny that we're going to talk about this after we just lambasted all the homebrew developers for their copyright infringements. I like, cursing, meandering. It's great. I can listen to that for hours.
Well, there you go.
Actually, that might be a great idea. Just use that as the intro, just like the first few seconds of it.
Right.
And then we segue into our babbling.
In the last episode, I felt like I was talking over people. So
yeah, we'll find a balance to it.
We'll just put Rick's mic really low, and
there you go.
William and I'll talk. Let's pretend that people are listening. The music is playing. They're like, "Wow, this is really long. I wonder when they're going to start talking." I just want to be louder than you guys because, I want to be above everybody. So.
Well,
I'm the egomaniac of the
there you
podcast.
And Rick has the deeper voice, so that'll probably...
Right, he's got the voice for radio. So
yeah.
I'm the egomaniac, he's the radio guy, and are you the fall guy, William? Does that make you the SoCal?
I guess so.
As 1,500 likes to post. Okay, hold on.
I should be marking down these edit points. Makes my job easier later.
That tells me that I've been off the. I haven't been as attentive as maybe I should be.
Yeah. Do your job, Rick. Jeez.
For Pete's sakes.
Oh God, I don't ask much. Yeah, I'll overdo it. Of course.